Chapter 632. Uncle Ghost Axe, Uncle Lang Lihua, Auntie Fengjiao, no. Su Jianshi saw the hundreds of heads floating around the white-robed elder. She froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. Endless thunder seemed to be rumbling in her head. Those were the simple villagers that she had accompanied day and night. They were all people who would rather stay by her side and wander about. But now, they had all been slaughtered by the white-robed elder. The ground was covered in blood. No. Su Jianshi was like a cuckoo crying blood as she let out a hoarse cry. Tears fell from her eyes as her heart felt like it was being stabbed. Su Moyan, who was lying in a pool of blood, used the last of his strength to shout, "Sister, run. Young miss, run." Long Yuan was covered in blood. The huge wound almost split his body in half, but he still resisted the white-robed elder's attacks. Lotus Village had been burned to the ground. Hundreds of villagers had died. Longyuan village chief had fought with his life on the line. Su Moyan was lying in a pool of blood. Su Jianshi held her head with both hands. Boundless pain seemed to be tearing her heart apart. Yi Guqin flashed to Su Jianshi's side and said, "Su Jianshi, run. Ha, I've finally found the right person. You want to leave?" The white-robed elder laughed when he saw Su Jianshi. After capturing Su Jianshi and obtaining the human emperor's sword, he would give it to Di Haoyan. The white-robed elder couldn't imagine how many rewards he would receive. Compared to these rewards, killing a few people was nothing. Not to mention destroying a village, the white-robed elder would even be willing to slaughter a low-level dynasty. "I'll kill you." Su Jianshi's voice was hoarse and mournful. Clang! A resplendent golden sword radiance appeared from Su Jianshi's heart and turned into an ancient golden sword that illuminated the surroundings. It was the human emperor's sword. The human emperor's sword. The white-robed elder wasn't shocked. Instead, he was delighted. He reached out to grab Su Jianshi and the human emperor's sword. Yi Guqin's expression twisted. How could he let the white-robed elder succeed? Boom! Without hesitation, the heavenly demon general armor appeared and the blood hell sword appeared in his hand. Soul-devouring secret technique, activate. Ancient god body, activate. Frenzy blood array, activate. Yi Guqin's cultivation soared to the extreme. A terrifying power was brewing in his body. An ant at the divine soul realm. That's... The white-robed old man had a disdainful look on his face. However, when he saw Yi Guqin's technique, a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. The heavenly demon general armor of the Baiming family. Also, could that be the inheritance of the ancient god clan, one of the 100 clans in the universe? The white-robed elder was extremely surprised. Although Yi Guqin had taken out the heavenly demon general armor, the white-robed elder did not think that Yi Guqin was from the Baiming family. After all, the divine soul realm was too weak in his eyes. It was impossible for a genius from the Baiming family to only have such cultivation. What surprised him was the ancient god body that Yi Guqin had manifested. The inheritances of the 100 races were mysterious and powerful. For example, the young master he served, Di Haoyan, was rumored to have the bloodline of the 100 races in the universe. Interesting. I'll capture you later and find out the secrets of the ancient god clan. The white-robed elder flicked his finger again. Yi Guqin unleashed the Shura sword essence, 1,000 gods tribulation, and life fall. Boom! An unparalleled fluctuation burst out. The violent sword chi was like a wave that could destroy everything. It rushed in all directions, overturning the surrounding houses and cracking the ground. Pfft! Yi Guqin spat out blood and flew backward. The heavenly demon general armor cracked as if it could not withstand the honorable master's attack. Dong! Yi Guqin fell to the ground, his body covered in blood. He lifted his head and stared coldly at the white-robed elder. He didn't faint. That's swordsmanship. The white-robed elder was surprised again. Although it was just a casual flick of his finger, its power was enough to kill the heaven and earth spiritual bridge. Based on his assumption, this young man should have fainted from his injuries even with the protection of the heavenly demon general armor. However, not only did Yi Guqin not faint, but he also seemed to have some strength left. Is it because of that swordsmanship? The white-robed elder thought. Just now, when he received the common people false sword, the white-robed old man felt a chill in his heart. If Yi Guqin's cultivation wasn't too low, that sword could have injured him. This kid is interesting. The white-robed elder reached out to grab Yi Guqin. At that moment, clanging sounds of swords rang out as the golden sacred sword broke through the air. The blazing golden sword light slashed directly at the white-robed elder. The white-robed elder felt a chill in his heart. He held the sword in his hand and sword chi burst out. Boom! Sword chi and true chi overturned the sky. Pfft! Su Jianchu's delicate body flew backward, blood staining the corner of her lips. Miss! Long Yuan's eyes widened. He dragged his injured body and charged at the white-robed elder. You're too weak. If you're at the venerable stage like me, or even if you're only at the divine dwelling stage, you'll be able to kill me with a single strike of the human emperor's sword. But now, it's just wishful thinking, the white-robed old man said indifferently. The emperor's sword was indeed a rare and powerful immemorial sacred weapon. But it also depended on who was using it. Su Jianchu's cultivation was only at the life and death realm. She could use the emperor's sword to kill heaven and earth spiritual bridge experts or even low-tier divine dwelling realm experts. But it would be too exaggerated to say that she could kill a sovereign with one sword. Unless she could draw on the emperor's sword's power. But then, it wouldn't be the person controlling the sword, but the sword controlling the person. The Human Emperor's Chapter, Boundless Sword Chi. Su Jianchu coughed up blood and poured all her true chi into the emperor's sword. After the emperor's sword spirit and the sword had completely merged, Su Jianchu naturally obtained the swordsmanship and cultivation technique contained within. Only the owner of the emperor's sword could use such a sword technique. Clang! 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 The emperor's sword trembled, and even the void seemed to tremble. The countless ancient characters engraved on the sword suddenly lit up with golden light. In the end, they turned into a torrent of ancient characters and formed a magnificent sword chi chapter. Die! Su Jianchu's eyes turned red and tears of blood seemed to flow from the corners of her eyes. The golden sword chi chapter traversed the void and charged towards the white-robed elder. Divine sword art, unparalleled sword. The white-robed elder didn't dare to let his guard down. He attacked again and a sword light lit up the sky. Boom! The sword chi exploded and sword waves burst forth. Su Jianchu was sent flying again. Yi Guqin suppressed his internal injuries and caught Su Jianchu. Su Jianchu's mouth was filled with blood. She looked like a blood-stained flower. Dead. They're all dead. Uncle Langhua, Auntie Fengjiao, Uncle Ghost Axe. Su Jianchu's tears of blood flowed down. She was exhausted. Looking at the miserable Su Jianchu, Yi Guqin felt a ball of anger burning in his heart. It was anger towards the heavenly god sword sect. It was anger towards Di Haotian. The human emperor's sword buzzed. Without Su Jianchu's control, it turned into a golden stream of light and entered Su Jianchu's heart. Hateful remnant. You actually injured me. The white-robed elder's expression was gloomy. A bloody wound had appeared on his hand that was holding the sword. Although it was very small. One had to know that he was a supremacy. Who would believe that a life and death chamber could injure a supremacy? As expected of the human emperor's sword. The white-robed elder's eyes were filled with faint killing intent. Sigh. A long sigh came from Long Yuan's mouth. He slowly took out a pill that was as red as blood and swallowed it. Yi Guqin, please take good care of the young lady and the others. Long Yuan smiled faintly. Village Chief Long Yuan. Su Jianchu bit her lips until it bled. That's the 9-death regretless pill. Long Yuan, you really don't want to live anymore. The white-robed elder's expression changed. Chapter 633. Long Yuan used the life-devouring mystic technique to consume his life force. Although his life was in danger, he could still survive if he had elixirs that could replenish his qi and blood vitality, or even saint medicine. For example, Yiguchen could use the ancient god's blood to heal Long Yuan. But now, Long Yuan had swallowed the 9 deaths pill. This pill was a saint pill. As its name implied, it would kill anyone who consumed it. However, it could allow a person to burn their last bit of energy to reach the peak of their cultivation. Boom! Long Yuan's true qi burned all over his body. It was as if he was wrapped in a blazing flame. A terrifying fluctuation spread out. Supremacy. At this moment, Long Yuan had broken through to the supremacy realm with the help of the 9 deaths pill. Di Haotian of the Heavenly God Sword Sect, Long Yuan, will wait for you in the Yellow Springs. Long Yuan roared as tears flowed from his eyes. Xiling, I can finally find you. Long Yuan rushed toward the white-robed elder like a moth to a flame. Su Xiling was his partner. She had died when the Heavenly God Sword Sect attacked the Su family. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to protect Su Jianshi and the others, Long Yuan would have fought the Heavenly God Sword Sect to the death. Now, his wish had been fulfilled. With his body as a sacrifice, even if he had to face Xiling in death, he would have a clear conscience. Damn it, Long Yuan, you're a madman. Divine sword art, sky-splitting sword. The white-robed old man's face, which had been filled with disdain, finally changed completely. He could ignore the half-step supremacy Long Yuan, but he couldn't ignore the supremacy Long Yuan. Moreover, Long Yuan was ready to die. He had no intention of living. Let's die together. Long Yuan's true qi and soul power erupted. He charged toward the white-robed elder like a burning meteor and exploded. Boom! Long Yuan self-destructed. Village Chief Long Yuan. Su Jianshi roared. Su Moyan, who was lying in a pool of blood, clenched his teeth. Terrifying shockwaves swept out. That was the self-destruction of a supremacy. Yiguchen suppressed his injuries and retreated with Su Moyan, Su Jianshi, Su Qiqiao, Shui, and the others. Pfft! At the center of the explosion, the sound of vomiting blood could be heard, as well as an extremely furious roar. Damned Long Yuan, this old man will definitely torture you Su family remnants to death. A disheveled figure escaped from the center of the true energy explosion. At this moment, the white-robed old man's robes were in tatters, his arms were charred black, and blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth. The clothes on his chest had been blasted open, and blood was dripping from the wound. The wound was quite deep, and one could vaguely see his beating heart. However, the vitality of a celestial palace venerable was extremely strong. Although he had suffered such serious injuries, it was not enough to kill him. Can you escape? The white-robed elder's expression was ferocious. He swallowed a healing elixir and stepped through the void to catch up with Yiguchen. Yiguchen's speed wasn't slow, but he had to carry Su Jianshi, Su Moyan, and the others. A moment later, Yiguchen stopped in his tracks. In the air, the white-robed elder's ferocious expression remained as he stared coldly at Yiguchen and the others. Su Jianshi and Su Moyan no longer had the strength to fight, but their gazes were filled with bone-deep hatred. The white-robed elder had single-handedly destroyed the entire Lotus village. Su Qiqiao's face was covered in tears as she wept. Shui, clutched Yiguchen's clothes tightly. Her big, wet eyes were also filled with tears. Now, only the 5 of them were left in Lotus village. Where can you run to? The white-robed elder sneered. Yiguchen's expression was indifferent. He put down Su Jianshi and Su Moyan and walked forward alone. Silly boy, don't. Su Jianshi's face paled. Yiguchen, you. Su Moyan gritted her teeth. Yiguchen did not say a word. He held the blood hell sword and protected himself with the heavenly demon general armor. You have guts to attack a venerable. The white-robed elder sneered. But you're also very stupid. He stretched out a finger, and his vigorous real chi turned into a finger in the void. He pointed at Yi Guchen. He still wanted to obtain the secret of the ancient god clan from Yi Guchen, so he didn't directly kill him. God-slaying sword art, Yama. Yi Guchen unleashed his Shura sword intent. Boundless blood-colored sword energy surged out. A murderous aura that could shake even the heavens swept out in all directions. Oh, sword intent and the Baiming family's god-slaying sword art? The white-robed elder was surprised, but he still sneered. Pfft. Without any suspense, Yi Guchen was sent flying again, spitting out blood. Azura blood C18 layers, god-slaying sword art, Permitha. Blood-colored sword energy streaked across the sky. Countless Permitha flowers bloomed, beautiful yet desolate. The white-robed elder simply flicked his finger. True energy burst out and sent Yi Guchen flying. Once, twice, thrice, Yi Guchen stood in front of Su Jianshi, preventing the white-robed elder from harming her. No, why are you so foolish? Su Jianshi shook her head. Her expression was mournful and heartbroken. Pfft. Yi Guchen was sent flying again and landed beside Su Jianshi. Blood dyed Yi Guchen's body red. Who knew how many of his bones were broken? His internal organs were also ruptured in many places. If it wasn't for his perfect physical body, the ancient god body, and the heavenly demon general armor, Yi Guchen would have already died. Foolish brat, you're really foolish. Too foolish. Su Jianshi crawled to Yi Guchen's side and touched his blood-stained lips. Her tears flowed like a spring. Since you're willing to risk your life to block a sword for me, what do I do for you? Yi Guchen spat out a mouthful of blood and stood up with difficulty. Su Jianshi wanted to pull him back. However, Yi Guchen stood in front of her again. Humph, as expected of the ancient god's inheritance. However, this old man is also impatient. I'll cripple your cultivation and capture all of you. The white-robed elder's expression sank. He held his sword and attacked again. The sharp sword aura turned into countless threads that shot toward Yi Guchen. If Yi Guchen was hit by these threads, all of his meridians would be destroyed. He would become a cripple and would never be able to cultivate again. Come on! Yi Guchen roared into the sky. Just as he was about to break the seal on the ancient god heart and fight to the death, a petite figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Her long silver hair was as gorgeous as the Milky Way. I won't let you hurt Big Brother. Her crisp voice sounded like she was about to cry. The person standing in front of him was Shua-er. Shua-er, get out of the way. Yi Guchen's expression changed. The endless sword threads landed on Shua-er's body. Terrifying sword aura spread in all directions. Yi Guchen's mind buzzed. Su Jianshi and the others also turned pale. Sister Shua-er. Su Qiqiao was also trembling. Shua-er, who was so innocent, cute, and kind, was dead. Humph, what a joke. The white-robed elder's expression didn't change at all. It was as if killing a girl was nothing to him. Yi Guchen's heart was engulfed by endless anger. Heavenly God's sword sect, all of you must die. Yi Guchen's anger burned the 9 heavens. He held the blood hell sword and was about to attack regardless of everything. However, all of a sudden, heaven and earth seemed to be silent at this moment. In the center of the spreading sword aura, a petite figure was faintly discernible. It was slowly elongating and growing. Terrifying sword intent spread out almost uncontrollably. The endless sea of blood overturned, and the 18 layers of the Azura blood sea appeared. It was a complete sword Dao domain. At the same time, a deathly stillness appeared. It was as if a terrifying sword Dao domain wanted to destroy everything. It was a pitch-black sword Dao domain that could destroy all life. As the 2 sword Dao domains spread out, numerous pitch-black cracks appeared in the sky, as if numerous eyes were opening. Scarlet blood flowed down from the cracks. The heavens opened their eyes and shed tears of blood. This was the cry of the heavens. Chapter 634. At this moment, the world seemed to have stopped. The heavens opened its eyes and shed tears of blood. Yi Guqian, Su Jianshi, Su Moyan, Su Qiqiao, and the others were all stunned. Even the white-robed elder's expression froze. At the center of the sword energy, a peerless figure slowly appeared. It was Shui, but it wasn't Shui. That figure was extremely slender and had graceful curves. She wore a white dress that fluttered in the air. Her silvery hair fluttered in the wind like the Milky Way and as clear as snow. She had a snow-white and cold face that could turn all living things upside down. Her long, narrow, and cold eyes opened. Her pupils were as red as blood. The eye of Azura. Scarlet blood flowed from the crack in the sky. Under such a strange background, a beautiful woman in a dress whiter than snow and with silver hair fluttering in the wind stood barefooted in the air. Stunning. Beautiful. Otherworldly. She's little sister Shui. Even the grief-stricken Su Qiqiao temporarily forgot to cry out of shock. Su Jianshi and the others' expressions froze. It was hard for them to associate the lovely Shui with a sweet smile. She was a peerless woman with an ice-cold temperament who was indifferent to all living things. Cold, this silver-haired woman was incomparably cold. Her blood-red eyes set off her sickly white skin, giving her a strange sense of beauty. This is the Heaven's Whale phenomenon. Who are you? The white-robed elder was also stunned, and his heart tightened. For the first time, he had a bad premonition in his heart. Rumor had it that certain forbidden figures would create a phenomenon when they were born, transformed, or broke through. For example, when Di Haotian was born, flowers fell from the sky, golden lotuses bloomed from the ground, and dragons sang. This meant that he had the qualifications to become a saint ancestor. However, that was an auspicious phenomenon, a blessing from the heavens. Now, the heavens had opened its eyes and shed tears of blood. This phenomenon was called the Heaven's Whale. It represented great misfortune and the rejection of the heavens and earth. Damn it, what kind of person did we encounter? The white-robed elder's expression was ugly. He was already injured by Long Yuan's self-destruction and was seriously injured. Now, he had even encountered such a strange situation. 18 levels of the Azura Blood Sea. The beautiful woman with fluttering silver hair slowly lifted her jade-like hand. In the void, a sea of blood overturned as a terrifying scarlet sword Qi soared into the sky. An 18-layered blood prison emerged from the blood sea. It was not an illusory sword domain like Yi Guqian's, but a true sword Dao domain. Suppress. The beautiful woman's voice was very pleasant to listen to, but also very cold, like frost and snow. The old man's expression changed abruptly when he saw the 18 layers of blood prison pressing down on him. That was a true peerless sword Dao domain. Even if he was a venerable, he could not ignore it. Divine sword technique, heaven-splitting sword. The white-robed old man gathered all the true qi in his body. His long sword cut through the air, and 100-meter-long sword qi collided with the 18 layers of blood prison. The void exploded, and shockwaves overturned the sky and earth. Humph. The white-robed elder snorted and retreated. At the same time, he couldn't hide the shock on his old face. Although he was seriously injured, he was still a venerable. Yet, he was forced to retreat. The beautiful woman with silver hair did not react, but blood began to seep out of the corner of her eyes and flowed down. Lifeless sword domain, heaven and earth extermination. She brought out another sword Dao domain. It was pitch black and deathly silent. A terrifying sword Dao domain that could exterminate all living things spread out and suppressed the white-robed elder. Another sword Dao domain. The white-robed elder's face turned pale as he tried to resist again. Su Jianshi and the others were all stunned. Shui could actually fight against a venerable. That's the lifeless sword Dao. Yi Guqian's eyes narrowed. Shui had always had two great sword intents in her body. Yi Guqian knew about the Azura sword intent. However, Yiguchen was not sure about the other kind of sword intent, which was deadly silent and destructive. Now, he finally knew. It was the peerless lifeless sword Dao. The lifeless sword Dao, as its name suggested, exterminated all life and killed all living things. It was a supreme offensive sword Dao that was comparable to the Azura sword Dao. The lifeless sword Dao and the Azura sword Dao are both ultimate killing Daos. Who is Shui-er? Yiguchen frowned. He remembered that he had found Shui-er at the bottom of the 18-blood prison. Shui-er was all alone, lying in a lake formed from countless drops of blood essence. The essence blood was collected by the Bloodthirst Tower's assassins using the flying guillotine. What's the secret behind this? Is Shui-er the Bloodthirst Tower's master, or is there someone else? Yiguchen was puzzled. At this moment, the battle was still ongoing. Under the suppression of the two sword Dao domains, the white-robed elder was in a sorry state. He was already seriously injured, but even so, he could still capture Su Jianshi and the others. However, Shui-er's change was a huge surprise that caught the white-robed elder off guard. Today, I'm going to capture all of you. I didn't expect that in addition to finding the human sovereign sword, I would also find the inheritance of the ancient god clan and someone who could trigger Heaven's Wail. You're all going to be my prisoners. Although the white-robed old man was in a sorry state, there was a hint of greed in his eyes. If he could capture all of these people and bring them back, then his contribution would be through the roof. Divine Sword Art, Celestial Sword Cage. The white-robed elder's true chi erupted as he began to use his trump card. He brandished his long sword, and countless sword chi shot out. The sword chi swam in the air and turned into a cage of sword chi. It was incomparably vast, trying to trap the beautiful woman, Yiguchen, Su Jianshi, and the others inside. The beautiful woman's blood-red eyes stared at the white-robed elder indifferently. Lifeless sword domain, annihilation of all things. Her voice was as cold as an ancient ice spring. The pitch-black sword Dao domain spread out and destroyed everything in its path. Rumble. The sword Dao domain collided with the white-robed elder's celestial sword cage. Following an earth-shattering explosion, the white-robed elder spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with horror. On the other hand, two streams of blood flowed from the corners of the beautiful woman's eyes. It seemed that the more power she used, the more blood she shed. Not good, her life aura is weakening. Su Moyan seemed to have sensed something and suddenly said. Yiguchen's expression tensed up. He also sensed that the silver-haired woman's life aura was weakening. Damn it. I'll leave first and come back after I recover. They can't escape. The white-robed elder also had the intention to retreat. He could also sense that the silver-haired woman's life aura was weakening. However, the silver-haired woman seemed to want to fight to the death with him. The white-robed elder didn't want to pay with his life. Just as the white-robed elder was about to retreat, the silver-haired woman suddenly moved. She gently moved her perfectly curved jade-like legs. Her beautiful bare feet lightly tapped the void. The next moment, she directly broke through space and landed beside the white-robed elder. Do you hear the sound of the heavens crying? Cold and ethereal words came from her mouth. She stretched out a hand and cut through the void. Scarlet blood tears flowed from the crack. The white-robed elder's figure suddenly stopped. Thump. Thump. Thump, the silver-haired woman's snow-white hand held a beating heart dripping with blood. The white-robed elder's eyes suddenly widened, and he lowered his head in disbelief. There was a hole in his chest, and his heart had already fallen into the silver-haired woman's hand. No. No, I'm a venerable of the heavenly god sword sect. How can I die? The white-robed elder spat out a mouthful of blood. His body fell from the sky and smashed hard on the ground. A venerable was ultimately a venerable. Unlike a saint, even if his physical body was destroyed, he could rely on the remnants of his primordial spirit to survive. Young master, and the heavenly god sword sect, will not let you go." The white-robed elder fell into a pool of blood, trembling and struggling. Finally, his vitality dissipated. His eyes were wide open, and he died with grievances. A venerable had fallen. Chapter 635. In the air, the silver-haired beauty was holding the bloody heart. A strange look flashed across her cold, blood-red eyes. She opened her cold lips as if she wanted to bite the heart. Shua. Yiguchen frowned and called out. How could the innocent and obedient Shua do something as bloody as eating someone else's heart? The silver-haired woman looked back. Her eyes were cold and confused. Tears of blood were still flowing down her pale cheeks. She closed her eyes as if she had lost all her strength. Her aura dropped rapidly as she fell from the sky. Yiguchen stepped forward and hugged the silver-haired woman. Her body was so soft that it was as if she had no bones. In Yiguchen's arms, the silver-haired woman's body gradually shrank. In the end, she turned back into the petite Shua, who looked like a silver kitten. However, Shua's delicate face was extremely pale. Her cherry lips were pale as if she had used up all her blood. Without hesitation, Yiguchen placed his hand on Shua's body and infused the ancient god blood into her body. The ancient god blood had a strong life force. What Shua had lost was her life force. Just as Yiguchen was using the ancient god blood to save Shua. Far away in the Saint Origin dynasty, Sky River Province. In a very ordinary city, there was an art workshop. In the art workshop, there were many people playing chess, reciting poems, and playing the zither. It was very elegant. On the windowsill of the art workshop, a man in a snow-white robe was leaning against the windowsill. He was holding a jade flute in his hand and playing it leisurely. Although the man was middle-aged, his face was still very handsome. His facial features were well-defined and his temperament was calm. However, there was a trace of melancholy between his eyebrows. He was a melancholy handsome man. His flute music was quiet and serene. It was sad and melancholy. It was moving and intoxicating. As soon as the song ended, the countless women in the surroundings revealed intoxicated expressions. Master Shua's flute music is really unparalleled. This song should only exist in the heavens. It is rare to hear it in the mortal world. Shua Yiqing's flute music. I won't get tired of it even if I listen to it 100 times. The young ladies of the aristocratic families all blushed as their hearts raced. The man named Shua Yiqing had an indifferent expression on his face. He wasn't happy because of the young ladies' praise. But at this moment, Shua Yiqing seemed to have sensed something, and his eyebrows rose slightly. In the next moment, the young lady's vision blurred, and they found that the figure had already disappeared. Young Master Shua is still so elusive. The young ladies sighed, their hearts feeling empty. On a tall building, Shua Yiqing held a flute behind her back and looked into the distance. The witch who made the heavens cry, Ji Ru Qianxue, you've finally awakened. Shua Yiqing's expression was leisurely, and it was hard to tell whether she was happy or disappointed. Lotus Village. With the help of Yiguchen's ancient god's blood, Yiguchen's ancient god bloodline was able to help Yiguchen. Shua's aura finally stabilized, although it was still very weak. This was because Shua was a petite little girl, and her vitality was inferior to that of an adult's. After expending a large amount of her vitality, she would become extremely weak. If not for the ancient god's blood, Shua's life would have been in danger. What's going on? Su Qiqiao felt like she was in a dream. Yiguchen was also full of doubts. He didn't understand these secrets. That's the heavens' whale vision. It's a great taboo, a great omen, and a great sin. This vision is almost extinct, and there aren't many people in the entire South Horizon region who can possess it. Su Moyan said in a deep voice. Yiguchen frowned. That kind of phenomenon didn't sound like a good thing. But how could Shua produce such a vision? What was her identity? Why did the blood-listening tower collect essence blood to cultivate Shua? There were too many doubts. Heaven's whale represents slaughter. Once, a heaven's whale appeared in the South Horizon region, and caused a boundless massacre. She massacred thousands of miles and slaughtered all living things. She was called the Heaven's Whale Witch. Su Moyan was born in an overlord family, and knew a lot of secrets. Heaven's Whale Witch. Yi Guqin was silent. Did this mean that she slaughtered all living things and made the world her enemy? Moreover, the Lifeless Sword Path and Azura Sword Path were both Daos that specialized in slaughter. Shua's identity can't be revealed. Otherwise, she won't be safe in the future, Su Moyan warned. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. Shua's breathing was stable, and she was fine. She was just unconscious because she was weak. However, the entire Lotus village was no more. Su Qiqiao sobbed, Su Jianqi seemed to have lost her soul, and Su Moyan clenched his fists tightly, his eyes bloodshot. This grudge could only be repaid with blood. Heavenly God Sword Sect, Di Haotian. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. He wasn't particularly close to Long Yuan and the others, but he had a good impression of them. Moreover, they were Su Jianqi's family. Now, they were all killed by the white-robed elder alone. I'm going to kill Di Haotian. Su Moyan struggled. His eyes were bloodshot, like a wolf choosing its prey. Calm down. Yi Guqin pulled Su Moyan back. At this moment, the divine condor returned with Blackie. Looking at the devastated Lotus village, the divine condor was stunned. Its feathers stood on end, and it was infuriated. Sigh. Yi Guqin sighed deeply. If Blackie hadn't gone with the divine condor, they might have been able to stop the white-robed elder in time. However, Yi Guqin couldn't blame the divine condor and the others. Who would have thought that the supremacy of the Heavenly God Sword Sect would appear? It's all because of me. Yi Guqin knew. If Su Jianqi hadn't blocked the sword for him, the Heavenly Sword Sect wouldn't have discovered him so early. Yi Guqin was indirectly responsible for the destruction of Lotus Village. Silly boy, this has nothing to do with you. Su Jianqi's voice was weak and pale, as if she had lost her soul. Let's bury the village chief and the others, Su Jianqi said quietly. Yi Guqin nodded. He, Su Jianqi, Su Moyan, and the others buried Long Yuan's group deep in the mountain range. While cleaning up the mess, Yi Guqin picked up Long Yuan's origin ring. He didn't think that the origin ring could be left behind in such a self-destruction. After a quick inspection, Yi Guqin found a blood-colored bottle in addition to some quasi-saint herbs and pills. Opening the bottle, a scarlet pill came into view. 9-death regretless pill. Yi Guqin murmured. This was a saint-grade pill that would kill anyone who took it. Yi Guqin thought for a moment and put it in his origin ring. Then, Yi Guqin and the others finished burying the villagers. Follow me. The venerables of the Heavenly God Sword Sect are dead. Di Haotian will not let this matter rest, Yi Guqin said. Before Long Yuan died, he asked Yi Guqin to take good care of Su Jianqi and the others. How could Yi Guqin let Su Jianqi and the others wander alone? Yi Guqin, leave. I was blind to have misjudged you. You're the source of all disasters, so leave. Don't worry about us anymore. Su Jianqi's eyes were red and her voice was trembling. She turned around and walked towards the back of the mountain. Little sister. Su Moyan wanted to say something, but stopped. Those words were too hurtful. Yi Guqin was silent. How could he not know what Su Jianqi was thinking? Yi Guqin chased after her. Back in the mountain, Su Jianqi returned to the cave and silently stared at Su Qingyu's soul inside the coffin. There were no tears to shed when the wound was too deep. Yi Guqin walked into the cave and looked at the girl's delicate back. Why are you still here? Didn't I say I hate you? So leave. Don't come looking for me and my brother again. Su Jianqi tried her best to suppress her trembling. However, one could clearly see her shoulders trembling. Su Jianshi, you're pretending to be cold and mean. Although I, Yi Guqin, am not a righteous swordsman, I still have my pride. Do you think I'm such a coward? You've done so much for me. If I cower and leave, how can I face my heart of the sword? Di Haotian is too strong. He's even stronger than Gu Xiaoyang. I don't want you to die. Su Jianshi's voice was filled with pleading and sobbing. So you want to use the sovereign sword to throw your life away? Yi Guqin asked. I. Su Jianshi was speechless because that was indeed what she was thinking. Su Jianshi, leave it to me. At this moment, Yi Guqin's eyes surged with determination. For you, let alone Di Haotian. So what if I kill a god? Chapter 636. Su Jianshi's heart was touched and her eyes turned red. So what if I slay a god for you? If these words came out of someone else's mouth, it might sound like a joke or a joke. But Su Jianshi knew that Yi Guqin never joked. His words had never been a joke. Uncontrollable emotions erupted from her heart. Su Jianshi pounced on Yi Guqin and hugged him tightly. It was as if Yi Guqin was her only pillar of support. Yi Guqin patted Su Jianshi's back. It was hard for him to imagine that such a naive and innocent girl would be forced to such an extent. Su Jianshi, do you remember the first time we met? After a long time, Su Jianshi gradually calmed down. Yi Guqin said faintly. I remember. It was at an auction. Su Jianshi said. You called yourself a righteous heroine. You were innocent and had a bright smile. I swear that I will return you to how you were before, said Yi Guqin. He wanted Su Jianshi to return to that carefree girl with a smile on her face. She wouldn't be as sad and desolate as she was now. Su Jianshi revealed a pale smile. She was satisfied with Yi Guqin's words. Yi Guqin suddenly said, Can I take uncle's soul-accumulating coffin away? Su Jianshi nodded slightly, yes. The soul-accumulating coffin can be stored in the origin ring. Su Jianshi stored the soul-accumulating coffin and Su Qingyu's soul in the origin ring. It would be great if father could wake up. Su Jianshi smiled bleakly. Although she had such hopes, she knew that it was just wishful thinking. Yi Guqin didn't say that he had a way to revive Su Qingyu's soul. After all, he wasn't too sure himself. Next, I have to search for the primal chaos origin crystal's whereabouts. I have to pass the soul tribulation as soon as possible and form the primal chaos sea of consciousness, Yi Guqin thought. If he could awaken Su Qingyu's soul, Su Jianshi's mood would improve. Moreover, even if a saint's physical body was destroyed, their soul would still be very powerful. This way, Su Jianshi and the others would be safe. Yi Guqin and Su Jianshi left the cave. The entire Lotus village had been completely destroyed. Broken walls and dilapidated houses had been reduced to ashes. The mountain range had been completely destroyed and was filled with cracks. Shui was still unconscious. Su Qiqiao had also fainted from grief. Su Moyan took some healing medicine and recovered a little. Su Jianshi looked at Su Qiqiao who was still sobbing even though she was asleep, and she couldn't bear it. Su Jianshi suddenly asked, Big brother, do you still have worry-free water? Su Moyan's expression changed. Was Su Jianshi going to take the potion? Give it to Qiqiao. Let her drink it and forget everything. Entrust her to a mountain family and let her live a peaceful and happy life. Su Jianshi couldn't bear for Qiqiao to suffer so much at such a young age. Su Moyan nodded slightly. He took out the worry-free water and fed it to Su Qiqiao. When she wakes up, she will forget everything. Yi Guqin said, all of you follow me back to the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest. At least it's a safe place for now. Su Moyan's expression was as cold as ice. He shook his head and said, I'll leave my little sister to you. But I won't be going with you. Big brother, don't tell me you. Su Jianshi's expression changed. Don't worry. I won't go to the Heavenly God's Sword sect right now to fight Dihaoyan. I want to go to a place where I can quickly become stronger. I won't die so easily. I want to see the Heavenly God's Sword sect's destruction and Dihaoyan's death with my own eyes. Su Moyan's expression was cold. His hatred couldn't be dispelled. Su Jianshi remained silent. She knew her big brother's character. Once he made a decision, he wouldn't change it. Be careful. Yi Guqin said. Right, there's something I can tell you. If you really want to deal with Dihaoyan, then keep an eye out for the Earthly Sovereign Sword. Su Moyan said. The Earthly Sovereign Sword? Yi Guqin was puzzled. Su Jianshi was the one who had the most right to speak. The Heavenly Sovereign, Earthly Sovereign, and Human Sovereign are three sacred swords. The Heavenly Sovereign and Earthly Sovereign are the three sacred swords. The Human Sovereign is one of them. The best way to deal with the Heavenly Sovereign Sword is to find the Earthly Sovereign Sword. The Earthly Sovereign Sword? Yi Guqin pondered. It was easier said than done. If the Earthly Sovereign Sword was so easy to find, then how could Dihaoyan not find it? However, this was also a clue. Yi Guqin took note of it. Although he hadn't met Dihaoyan before, the hatred between them was hard to resolve. Afterward, Su Moyan left by himself. Su Jianshi, follow me back to the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, Yi Guqin said. Su Jianshi nodded. She wanted to leave alone, but Yi Guqin wouldn't allow it. Yi Guqin carried Shui, while Su Jianshi carried Su Qiqiao. They took one last look at the Lotus Village that disappeared in the blood and fire. Heavenly God Sword Sect, Dihaoyan, just you wait. Yi Guqin's heart was cold. He would settle this debt of blood with the Heavenly God Sword Sect and Dihaoyan. The South Horizon region was vast and boundless. In a mysterious place filled with spiritual qi. The 10,000 zhang tall mountain peak was as tall as a heavenly sword, hidden in the clouds. At the peak of the mountain, there was a young man sitting cross-legged on a praying mat. He wore a loose white robe, and his skin was as smooth as jade. His golden hair was as dazzling as the sun. His pair of silver eyes were as deep as the moon. He was also quite handsome. However, the most eye-catching thing about him wasn't his appearance, but his temperament. He seemed to be the most perfect creation of the heavens. Not a bit more, not a bit less. He had an otherworldly temperament that didn't belong to the mortal world. This was the perfect temperament that only a 10th grade sovereign would have. His silver eyes were emotionless and indifferent. Roar! Countless golden sword qi gathered around the man's body and turned into a terrifying golden dragon. The true dragon roared into the sky, and countless dragon shadows flew out. The void seemed to be filled with tens of thousands of dragons that could crush anything. Congratulations, Prince, for comprehending the true Dragon Sword Dao and comprehending the Sword Dao domain, the 10,000 Dragon Sword Realm. 3 figures appeared in the void. One was an old woman, one was a middle-aged man, and one was a cold and beautiful woman. The 3 of them were all sovereigns in the Heavenly Palace realm, and they cupped their hands respectfully to the man. It's a small matter. The true Dragon Sword Dao is a bit more difficult than the other Sword Daos, but it's not a problem. The man with golden hair and silver eyes looked indifferent. It was as if comprehending the Sword Dao wasn't a big deal. By the way, Elder Qiu is dead, the man said casually. What? Elder Qiu is dead? The 3 of them looked at each other. Although Third Brother's cultivation was the weakest among the 4 venerables, he was still a venerable. How could he have died so easily? The cold and arrogant woman asked in disbelief. She was Sovereign Dong, concubine Lang. Interesting, very interesting. I can clearly sense the aura of the human sovereign sword. Su Jianshi, where can you escape to? Even if the human sovereign sword recognizes you as its master, I can refine you and the sword together. With your flesh and blood as a sacrifice, the human sovereign sword will become even stronger. Cruel words came out of the man's mouth. The 3 sovereigns, Spring, Summer, and Dong, felt that it was natural. Because their prince was the true dragon, Di Haotian. Get ready. I'm coming out of seclusion. A golden sword shadow appeared between Di Haotian's eyebrows. It was 70% similar to Su Jianzhi's human sovereign sword, but it carried a supreme majestic aura. Yes. The three sovereigns cupped their hands and nodded. Di Haotian coming out of seclusion wasn't a small matter. The three sovereigns retreated and began to make preparations. Di Haotian stood up and looked in the direction of the Saint Origin dynasty with a faint smile. Who can stop me from taking the human sovereign sword? Because I am the heavenly emperor, the true dragon. Di Haotian put his hands behind his back and stepped into the void. His arrogant voice suppressed the heavens. Chapter 637. Yi Guqin, Su Jianzhi, Su Qiqiao, who was carrying the unconscious Shui, and Blackie, the divine eagle, left the ruined Lotus village. They found a peaceful village at the border of the Saint Origin dynasty. They handed the unconscious Su Qiqiao to a kind and simple family with no children. Su Qiqiao would forget everything after she woke up after taking the worry-forgetting water. She would live the rest of her life in peace and wouldn't have to remember those painful memories. As for Shui, her identity was a mystery. Not to mention that she was related to the Bloodthirst Tower. Yi Guqin naturally wouldn't entrust her to someone else. Su Jianzhi, you can take Shui, back to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. I'm sure the forest will protect you. I still need to go somewhere else, Yi Guqin said. I don't want to be separated from you. Su Jianzhi stammered. Her aggrieved expression was pitiful. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. Yi Guqin patted Su Jianzhi's shoulder. Su Jianzhi nodded obediently. Although Yi Guqin was her support, Su Jianzhi didn't want to restrain Yi Guqin. She wouldn't force him to stay by her side. Su Jianzhi was a girl with her own thoughts. Su Jianzhi took Shui, and Blackie to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Yi Guqin changed directions and headed to the Beichen mansion. He wanted to collect the remaining heaven-splitting sword souls. Yi Guqin was under a lot of pressure. He already had Gu Shaoyang and the Starry Sword Pavilion as his enemies. Now, there was Di Haotian and the Heavenly God Sword Sect. The burden on Yi Guqin's shoulders was too heavy. He had to use all kinds of methods to make himself stronger. After a few days, Yi Guqin arrived at the Sky Sword Peak of the Beichen mansion. After he shattered the sword Seek Steel, this place became desolate. No one came here. Yi Guqin came to the peak and sighed when he saw the old scenery. He recalled all the memories he had with Situ Hongxue in this place. The woman whom he had hurt had a confrontation with him on the infinite plains. In the end, the sword that was about to land on his heart did not pierce through. Situ Hongxue could not bear to see him like this. She still had feelings for him. I wonder where she is now. Yi Guqin sighed. Situ Hongxue was fancied by Grandma Withered Flower, and she must have brought her to some faction. Now, Yi Guqin suspected that Situ Hongxue might have joined an overlord force. However, he and Situ Hongxue had long since forgotten each other. The only thing Situ Hongxue left behind was a hairpin, which was engraved with the words, "If the sky has feelings, the sky will also grow old." Yi Guqin's self-created sword technique, Sentimental Heavens, was also derived from this. Suppressing the emotions in his heart, Yi Guqin's golden sequence mark lit up on the back of his hand. He directly entered the heavenly law sword realm. Yi Guqin already had 30,000 heaven-ripping sword souls in his body. This time, Yi Guqin planned to absorb all the remaining sword souls into his body. Originally, with Yi Guqin's original cultivation, it was absolutely impossible for him to do so. However, Yi Guqin now cultivated the ancient god technique and had the body of an ancient god, so his capacity had greatly increased. After entering, Yi Guqin began to absorb the heaven-ripping sword souls. 40,000, 50,000, 60,000, more and more heaven-ripping sword souls merged into Yi Guqin's body. This feeling was like swallowing a blade into his stomach. It was extremely painful, as if he was being cut into pieces. However, Yiguchen's gaze was firm, and his expression did not change. In order to make Gu Xiaoyang and Di Haoyan pay with their blood, Yiguchen had to become stronger. After absorbing 70,000 heaven-ripping sword souls, Yiguchen's body was covered in blood. There were even some green sword souls that could not be restrained. They broke through his skin and tried to escape. Ancient God technique. Yiguchen looked up to the sky and roared. His body instantly grew taller. A star mark appeared between his eyebrows, and his physical strength instantly increased by 5 times. The pain of being full was slightly relieved. 80,000, 90, 000, 100, 000, even after activating the body of an ancient god, Yiguchen's body was covered in blood. He looked like a bloody man. In the end, when the remaining 8,000 sword souls were completely absorbed into Yiguchen's body. With a loud boom, the entire Heavenly Path Sword Realm began to tremble and collapse. It was as if its mission was completed and it was about to disappear. Yiguchen's figure flashed and directly left this place. Boom! On the Sky Sword Peak, Yiguchen's figure broke free. The vigorous sword souls in his body seemed to be unable to be suppressed. He looked up to the sky and roared. The 108,000 sword souls turned into a shocking torrent, splitting the sky and splitting the earth. Boom! It was like a giant green sword chi dragon, crossing the sky and breaking through the clouds. The power of the sword souls covered all directions. So powerful. Yiguchen's eyes were clear. The 108,000 heaven-ripping sword souls were the ultimate sword technique of the 8th generation sword master, Yi Tianqing. The more there were, the more powerful it was. Yiguchen now felt that the power of the 108,000 sword souls was more than 10 times stronger than the previous 30,000 sword souls. Moreover, as Yiguchen's strength increased, the power of the sword souls would also become stronger. What a huge consumption! At the same time, Yiguchen also noticed that when he used the 108,000 sword souls at the same time, the consumption of his true chi was extremely terrifying. If not for his sea of chi, he was afraid that his true chi would be exhausted in a few breaths. Yiguchen withdrew the sword souls and left Beichen Mansion. He still had a place to go, which was the honorable cave abode in the Tianhuang Plains. There was still the last barrier in the cave abode that had not been broken. Yiguchen believed that there must be a great opportunity behind the last barrier. If he could obtain it, Yiguchen's strength would increase once again. He would be more confident in facing Gu Zun, Gu Xiaoyang, and the others in the prodigy battlefield. Just as Yiguchen turned around and left for the Tianhuang Plains, Su Jianshi brought Shui, and the others to the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest. As expected, with Yiguchen's reputation in the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, Su Jianshi, who had a close relationship with Yiguchen, naturally received the best care. Her residence was personally arranged by Yan Wushuang. Yan Wushuang couldn't help but sigh when she saw the girl's beautiful yet pure expression. Perhaps she wasn't inferior to Su Jianshi in terms of appearance. But her pure personality was completely different from hers. Yan Wushuang smiled bitterly when she thought of this. When she first met Yiguchen, her arrogance was indeed disgusting. Su Jianshi also settled down in the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest. With her relationship with Yiguchen, no one dared to disrespect her. But a few days later, a girl came to the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest. Who are you? This is the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. The 2 disciples of the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest who were guarding the door said. Although that was the case, they still looked at the girl in amazement. She looked like she was 17 or 18 years old. She wore luxurious clothes and had snow-white skin. Her sharp chin was slightly raised, giving off a domineering aura. But the most eye-catching thing about her was her cultivation. She had reached the life and death realm. A 17-year-old life and death realm. The eyes of the 2 disciples faintly revealed shock. Such talent could be ranked among the top in the Saint Origin dynasty. After all, only Gu Zun, Xian Hao, and the young war emperor had reached the life and death realm in the Saint Origin dynasty. May I know where you're from? Sensing that the girl's identity was extraordinary, the two disciples asked. So this is one of the so-called 7 major forces. Heh. The girl's lips were filled with disdain as she handed over a token. That's the sect master's token. The two disciples were stunned. Chapter 638. The two disciples rubbed their eyes, thinking that they had seen wrongly. But when they took a closer look, they realized that it was the sect master's token. The sect master's token was something that only the sword sect's sect master could possess. It was the token that Yan Chang'e had just obtained. But why was the sect master's token in the hands of an unfamiliar girl? Can you move aside? The girl held the token and entered the sword sect's pagoda forest. The two disciples looked at each other and hurriedly ran back to the sect to report this matter. Afterward, the entire sword sect's pagoda forest was in an uproar. She was able to reach the life and death threshold at such a young age and even possessed the sect master's token. Where did this girl come from? Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others were all alarmed. In fact, even Elder Qing He and the others had rushed over. Who are you? Why do you possess father's token? Yan Wushuang stared at the sect master's token in the girl's hand. Oh, you're Yan Wushuang. You're only at the 9th transformation of the divine soul realm. How weak. The girl curled her lips, revealing a trace of disdain. These words caused many of the surrounding inner academy disciples to faintly reveal anger on their faces. Yan Wushuang was respected in the inner yard, but she was being looked down upon. Let me ask you, why do you have father's token? Yan Wushuang gritted her teeth. I'll tell you if you can defeat me, said the girl. Although the girl was at the life and death threshold, Yan Wushuang was anxious to obtain news about Yan Chang'e. So she accepted the challenge without any hesitation. But the result was that Yan Wushuang was defeated. Pfft! Yan Wushuang's body flew out and she vomited blood. Although the girl didn't kill her, she didn't hold back. Damn it! The surrounding disciples were enraged when they saw Yan Wushuang's mouth stained with blood. Remember, the person who defeated you is called Yan Feiling. The arrogant girl called Yan Feiling raised her chin and said. Her surname is Yan. A strange look flashed across the faces of the surrounding people. Could it be a coincidence that they had the same surname? Why do you have the sect master's token? Yan Wushuang wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. He was also surprised that Yan Feiling had reached the life and death chamber at such a young age. Although Yan Wushuang had the will of life and death, she ultimately gave up on using it to break through to the life and death chamber. Otherwise, she could have become a life and death chamber warrior by now. Don't worry, your father will return very soon. I'm only here to take a look at this so-called sword sect pagoda forest. From the looks of it, the sect established by Yan Chang'e is only a so-so. Even his daughter is so weak. Yan Feiling shook her head as disappointment appeared in her beautiful eyes. How dare you disrespect the sect leader? An elder shouted coldly. Yan Feiling curled her lips and held the sect master's token. This token was given to me by Yan Chang'e. Can you afford to offend him? Elder Green Crane and the others fell silent. Seeing the sect leader's token was like seeing the person himself. Naturally, they did not dare to act recklessly. Moreover, this Yan Feiling seemed to have some relationship with Yan Chang'e. In addition, she called herself a princess, which made people suspicious of her identity. It was precisely because of this that Elder Qing He and the others did not act rashly. Boring. Too weak. Yan Feiling's footsteps flashed as she began to stroll around the sword sect pagoda forest. Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others followed behind her, monitoring her movements. Yan Feiling did not mind as she walked around and looked around. She was like an emperor patrolling around, monitoring the surroundings. After that, there were also some disciples who were ranked high in the inner court who could not stand Yan Feiling's arrogance. However, without exception, they were all defeated miserably. Weak, too weak. The sword sect pagoda forest established by Yen Chang'e is really weak. None of them can be called a Sky Pride. I'm afraid none of you will be able to enter the Sky Pride battlefield's preliminaries. Yan Feiling shook her head in disappointment. You. Ji Ling and the others also had stomachs full of anger. Who was she looking down on? If senior brother Yi was here, you wouldn't have the chance to behave so atrociously. An inner court disciple said angrily. And, who are you talking about? Yan Feiling's eyes widened as she raised her hand to grab the disciple. Who else? Of course it's the legend of our sword sect pagoda forest's younger generation, sword sect Yiguchen. The disciple said firmly. What's Yiguchen's cultivation? Grand threshold? Yan Feiling curled her lips. Divine Soul 9 transformations. The disciple said truthfully. What? Did I hear wrongly? The Divine Soul 9 transformations can be called an invincible legend and a sword sect master. Who knew that Yan Feiling's face froze when she heard that? She then held her stomach and laughed. The inner court disciples were furious. Yiguchen was the hero in their hearts, but Yan Feiling laughed at him. Shuang, it seems like Yan Feiling isn't from our dynasty. Ji Ling whispered in Yan Wushuang's ear. Yan Wushuang nodded inwardly. Yiguchen was currently in the limelight in the Saint Origin dynasty. However, Yan Feiling didn't even know about Yiguchen's achievements. Clearly, she wasn't from the Saint Origin dynasty and might be from another dynasty. But what did that have to do with Yan Chang'e? Yan Wushuang couldn't figure it out. Yan Feiling continued to stroll around the sword sect's pagoda forest. She came to a secluded mountain that was filled with spiritual energy. It could be considered a blessed land in the inner court. There was an exquisite courtyard at the top of the mountain. This place has barely enough spiritual energy. It can be used as a place to stay, Yan Feiling said indifferently. In Yan Feiling's words, this treasured land that was full of spiritual energy could only be considered barely passable. No, that place is. Ji Ling hesitated. That was the place they had arranged for Su Jiancher to stay. Right at this moment, a plump little red bird and a furry little monkey came out laughing and playing with each other. Stupid monkey, if you dare to fight with me for herbs again, I'll pluck all your fur off. The divine eagle chased after Blackie. What a cute demonic beast. I want it. Yan Feiling's eyes lit up when she saw the divine eagle and Blackie. She dashed forward and was about to grab the divine condor and Blackie. Stupid woman, who are you? How dare you suppress me? Seeing Yan Feiling raising her hand to grab them, the divine condor let out a loud screech. Crimson flames burst out from its body and surged toward Yan Feiling. The divine eagle was a rank 5 demonic beast, comparable to the life and death gates. Blackie might have been sealed by the ancient Tao God seal, but it still had the cultivation of a rank 5 demonic beast. At the same time, it also had the indestructible demonic body. It couldn't be killed. Both of you are rank 5 demonic beasts. Then all the more reason for me to take you as my demonic pets. Yan Feiling's eyes lit up. They were so cute and were rank 5 demonic beasts. If she nurtured them well, they might be able to reach a higher level. Damn it, stupid woman. How dare you take me as your demonic pet? I'll take you as my pet. The divine eagle's voice was childish, but it was filled with anger. The relationship between it and Yiguchen was not that of a master and a demon pet, but that of an equal. Yiguchen also called it Brother Condor. But this stupid woman who came out of nowhere wanted to take it as her demonic pet. Naturally, the divine eagle was furious. Boom! The divine fire of the vermilion bird swept toward Yan Feiling. Blackie was also squeaking. This is a little tricky. Fortunately, this princess has this. Yan Feiling's delicate body swayed as she took out a jade bottle. She opened the bottle and a faint fragrance came out. This kind of fragrance was just a little bit of fragrance to people. But when the divine eagle and Blackie smelled it, they felt dizzy and saw stars. Stupid woman. What did you do to me? The divine eagle was dizzy and fainted on the ground with Blackie. Hee hee, this is the bewitching fragrance that is specially made to suppress demonic beasts. Most demonic beasts can't resist it. In a small place like yours, you must have never seen it before, right? Yan Feiling laughed disdainfully. She stepped forward and grabbed the divine eagle and Blackie. Stop! A weak voice was heard. A stunning figure in green walked out of the courtyard. She was as beautiful as a lotus flower, but her face was pale and weak. It was Su Jianshi. Chapter 639. Put down the divine eagle and Blackie. Su Jianshi hadn't recovered from her injuries yet. Oh. You're their master. Great, I'll take them. Yan Feiling didn't care at all. They're not mine, but I can't let you take them away. Su Jianshi said. She used to be naive and lively, and she considered herself a chivalrous woman. But after the upheaval, Su Jianshi's temperament seemed to have calmed down. She was melancholic and introverted. Her voice was weak and pitiful. Yan Feiling directly ignored it and looked at Su Jianshi. Her eyes suddenly lit up. You're in the life and death threshold. Yan Feiling was a little surprised. She came to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest with an arrogant attitude because no one in the younger generation had reached the life and death threshold. This made Yan Feiling feel disdain for the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. How could Yan Feiling not be surprised when there was a girl around her age who had also reached the life and death threshold? Put down the divine eagle and Blackie. Su Jianshi didn't want to waste any more time. Sure. As long as you defeat me, I'll leave the two beasts behind, Yan Feiling said. You're going too far. Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others couldn't stand it anymore. Didn't Yan Feiling notice that Su Jianshi's body was weak and hadn't recovered from her injuries? She actually wanted to challenge Su Jianshi. What? You don't dare. Yan Feiling raised her chin. Her disdainful gaze made others want to slap her. The divine eagle and Blackie aren't yours to begin with. What right do you have to use them as a wager? Su Jianshi's tone turned cold. That's not up to you. Yan Feiling took a step forward and her Zhenqi surged. In the next moment, she appeared before Su Jianshi. Jade wave palm. Yan Feiling shouted. She directly attacked without giving Su Jianshi the slightest chance to recover. Su Jianshi couldn't dodge. She had already exhausted her Zhenqi in the Lotus Village and fought with the white-robed old man. Her injuries hadn't healed yet, so she couldn't use the power of the human emperor sword in her heart. Even if she could, she wouldn't use it. That would only make Di Haotian more aware of her location. Su Jianshi forcefully gathered the remaining true qi in her body and placed her arms in front of her. Bang! With a loud explosion, true qi exploded. Su Jianshi's body was blown away like a withered leaf as she spat out a mouthful of blood. His face, which was already pale to begin with, was now completely drained of blood. You've gone too far. Yan Wushuang and Ji Ling moved to stop him. Yan Feiling's lips curled into a contemptuous smile. With a twist of her delicate body, the belt wrapped around her slender waist fell down and turned into a long golden whip. Loser, step aside. Yan Feiling was incomparably arrogant. With a swing of her long whip, vigorous true qi spread out and forced Yan Wushuang and the others to retreat. Aren't you also a life and death chamber? Why are you so weak? Again. Yan Feiling didn't show any mercy and continued attacking Su Jianshi. Su Jianshi couldn't summon the mortal sovereign's sword, and her body had yet to recover from her injuries. There was no true energy in her Qi Si, so how could she be a match for Yan Feiling? Whoosh! A whip shadow lashed Su Jianchu's arm, leaving behind a bloody scar. Su Jianchu's face turned pale as she took a dozen steps back and spat out another mouthful of blood. Enough! At this moment, Elder Qing He and the others finally arrived. Because of the sect master's token and the fact that Yan Feiling seemed to have some relationship with Yan Chang'e, Elder Qing He and the others didn't do anything to Yan Feiling. However, Yan Feiling was simply too arrogant, despotic, and overbearing. Furthermore, Su Jianchu was brought here by Yi Guqin. If anything happened to her, the Sword Sect's Tower Forest wouldn't be able to answer to him. Hence, Elder Qing He and the others had no choice but to intervene. Forget it. It's meaningless. Even the life and death chamber is so weak. You're truly a low-level dynasty. Yan Feiling ignored Elder Qing He and the others as she picked up the unconscious Divine Eagle and Blackie and turned to leave. The Sword Sect's Tower Forest's disciples were furious. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Su Jianchu had yet to recover from her injuries, which was why she couldn't use her strength. But in Yan Feiling's eyes, saying that Su Jianchu was too weak was laughable. Put them down. Su Jianchu's face was pale due to the loss of blood. Lady Su. Yan Wushuang and the others stepped forward and fed Su Jianchu some healing medicine before treating her wounds. Not only did Su Jianchu's injuries not recover, but they were even more serious. Yan Wushuang's expression was unsightly. If Yi Guqin returned and saw this, he would definitely be furious. Yan Feiling, I don't care where you're from or who you are, but you're in big trouble. When Yi Guqin returns, you'll pay the price, Yan Wushuang said coldly. Oh, it's Yi Guqin again. I've heard this name so many times. A mere 9 transformations divine soul can only make a name for himself in a low-level dynasty. Yan Feiling sneered and brought the unconscious divine condor and Blackie directly into the yard. After all, this was Su Jianchu's residence. Not only did she steal other people's beasts, but she also bullied the heavily injured Su Jianchu and even took over her residence. What kind of environment could nurture such an arrogant and unruly young lady? I'll be staying here from now on. Yan Chang'e should be back soon. How disgusting. Both Chu Qingqi and Yi Xia had looks of disgust on their faces. From her tone, she might be from a mid-tier or high-tier dynasty. But what does that have to do with the sect master? Ji Ling was confused. Everyone was silent. Elder Qinghe sighed, Lady Su, go rest somewhere else. The truth will be revealed when the sect master returns. Before that, she has the sect master's medallion. It won't be easy to touch her. Even though Yan Wushuang was unwilling, she was still able to forcefully suppress her anger. However, one could imagine how furious Yi Guqin would be when he returned and found out about this. At that time, no identity would be useful. The Tianhuang Plains was as desolate and bleak as ever. As one of the most dangerous places in the Saint Origin dynasty, although it had always been very dangerous, there were still some cave dwellings left behind by the predecessors, which attracted waves of cultivators to explore this place. It took Yi Guqin several days to reach the Tianhuang Plains. However, Yi Guqin felt something was wrong as soon as he approached the edge of the Tianhuang Plains. This is... Yi Guqin made a grabbing motion in the air, and a wisp of extremely faint, pitch-black death chi flowed between his fingers. Is this the death chi of the bottomless demonic abyss? Yi Guqin was surprised. The bottomless demonic abyss contained death chi that could devour a person's vitality. The source of the death chi was the eternal demonic city at the bottom. However, Yi Guqin was only at the edge of the Tianhuang Plains. Although the demonic abyss's demonic chi was terrifying, it was limited to a certain area. Could it be? Yi Guqin looked into the distance. The entire Tianhuang Plains seemed to be shrouded in a faint layer of death and ominous. Could something have happened to the eternal demonic city at the bottom of the bottomless demonic abyss? Yi Guqin pondered. The eternal demonic city might be related to the primordial sword. However, Yiguchen still had to go to the venerable cave residence to search for the remaining opportunities. Chapter 640. The deathly aura in the bottomless demon abyss had begun to spread to the entire infinite flatland, and there were even signs of it spreading outwards. Yiguchen's figure flew towards the honorable cave dwelling. The deeper he went into the infinite flatland, the stronger the deathly aura became. However, it did not affect Yiguchen much. Not to mention that he had a boundless sea of chi that could block the corrosion of the deathly aura for a long time. The thunder calamity sword in his body was also the nemesis of the deathly aura. What happened to the bottomless demon abyss? It seems that my immemorial sword token will come in handy soon. Yiguchen thought to himself. Previously, the Murong family and Prince Yuani had joined forces to destroy the Situ family. Yiguchen had obtained an immemorial sword token from Murong Ditian. The other one was obtained by Prince Yuani. Yiguchen was also curious about the relationship between the immemorial sword token and the Eternal Demon City. Were there any traces of the famed immemorial sword in the Eternal Demon City? If so, Yiguchen did have the intention to obtain the famed immemorial sword. A famed immemorial sword could increase one's battle strength greatly. Strictly speaking, Di Haotian's Emperor's sword was only 1/3 of a famed immemorial sword. If I can obtain the famed immemorial sword, it will be possible to kill Di Haotian. Yiguchen kept thinking. Not long after, Yiguchen arrived at the ancient stone forest. Not long after he entered the stone forest, he saw the honorable cave dwelling sealed by the reincarnation sword lotus. Yiguchen entered the honorable cave dwelling without hesitation. Although the light curtain in the deepest part of the honorable cave dwelling required at least the cultivation of the life and death hidden latch to break it. However, if Yiguchen transformed into the body of an ancient god, he could crush ordinary life and death hidden latches. After a while, Yiguchen arrived at the location of the last light curtain. Yiguchen immediately activated the ancient god tactics, and his body grew to 9 feet tall. Ancient light patterns flowed and spread across his body, and an ancient god star mark appeared between his eyebrows. Yiguchen's ancient god power surged within his body. Holding the blood hell sword, he swept out. The terrifying sword radiance that carried the power of the ancient god slammed into the light screen. Rumble. Smoke and dust rose in all directions, and the light screen trembled violently like waves. Finally, with a loud bang, it shattered into countless specks of light. Yiguchen entered in a flash. As soon as he entered, Yiguchen felt an ancient Tao connotation permeating the air. Yiguchen took a closer look. The space inside was an ordinary stone room. A withered corpse sat cross-legged in the middle. To Yiguchen's surprise, there were countless branches extending from the corpse. The ancient Taoist connotation came from these branches. The ancient tree of enlightenment. Yiguchen's eyes lit up. In the venerable cave, he had found the leaves and branches of the ancient tree of enlightenment many times. The ancient tree of enlightenment was extremely rare even among divine medicines. It could be called a top divine medicine. Although it did not have the ability to heal the dead, nor could it heal the primordial spirit, nor did it have the various abilities of other divine medicines. But it could greatly increase one's comprehension, and could even give one an epiphany. The value of the ancient tree of enlightenment was unimaginable. In the outside world, not to mention a complete ancient tree of enlightenment. Even a leaf or a branch of the ancient tree of enlightenment was extremely rare and would be fought over. It could be imagined that the ancient tree of enlightenment would be of great help to one's comprehension of various cultivation methods, sword techniques, and sword intent. Yiguchen already had the sword demon talent and the heart illuminated sword. Now, he had the ancient tree of enlightenment. That kind of comprehension talent could only be described as a peerless genius. Yiguchen took a deep breath. The value of this venerable cave was too great. Regardless of anything else, just this ancient tree of enlightenment alone was too worth it. With the ancient tree of enlightenment, my various cultivation methods and sword techniques can be improved. The comprehension of the third style of the 10,000 gods tribulation will also be faster, and the comprehension of becoming one with the sword will also be faster. Yiguchen suppressed a trace of joy in his heart. He looked around the stone room. He found that the walls of the stone room were covered with countless sword marks. Some of the sword marks were very familiar to Yiguchen. They were the tracks of the god-slaying sword technique. Some of the sword marks were somewhat unfamiliar, and Yiguchen could not make sense of them for a moment. But what was surprising was that Yiguchen found that a small number of the sword marks overlapped with each other. The god-slaying sword technique had merged with another sword technique. Yiguchen suppressed the doubts in his heart and walked in front of the withered corpse. He found that there were many words carved around the stone platform where the corpse was sitting. I am Venerable Coldsword of the Biming family, and I have come here in search of the ancient famed sword. Who would have thought, an ancient conspiracy. The demonic sword crosses the sky, the celestial emperor covers the dust, a catastrophe is coming. My bones have been invaded by the aura of death, and I have no vitality left. I leave behind my legacy and the ancient tree of enlightenment. In addition, the god-slaying sword technique and the celestial slaying sword technique are carved here. When the two are merged, it will become the Emperor's sword technique, Celestial Gods Weep. The Celestial Gods Weep is related to a great secret. No one in the Biming family has been able to comprehend it completely. If not for the ancient tree of enlightenment, I would not have been able to comprehend it. If a descendant comes here and obtains the ancient tree of enlightenment and comprehends the celestial gods weep, you can give it to the frost sky saint of the Biming family. This is my only request. After reading the many words left on the stone platform, Yiguchen fell into deep thought. The demonic sword crosses the sky, the celestial emperor covers the dust. Yiguchen had also seen these words in the cave where Five-Crowned King had fallen. The Celestial Emperor was undoubtedly the Celestial Emperor's sword that hung in the sky above the Nantian region. It was a true sky roll sword, and was fundamentally different from the earth roll sword. As for the demonic sword, it could make the Celestial Emperor cover the dust. Although it might not be a sky roll sword, it was most likely a powerful sword on the earth roll. In addition, Yiguchen had not expected that the two sword techniques of the Biming family, the God-slaying sword technique and the Celestial slaying sword technique, could be merged to form the Emperor sword technique, Celestial Gods Weep. He recalled the time when he was chasing Dongfang Hong in the bottomless demon abyss. After displaying the fifth move of the God-slaying sword technique, Dongfang Hong seemed to be surprised and fearful. At that time, Yiguchen felt that the god-slaying sword technique seemed to have some secrets. Now, he finally knew. The two Supreme King sword techniques could be merged to form the Emperor sword technique. And according to the last words of the Cold Sword Venerable, after comprehending the celestial gods weep, he could give it to the Frost Sky Saint of the Biming family. Could it be that there are several branches in the Biming family? Yiguchen was puzzled. However, he did not know much about the Biming family. But since he had received the opportunity, Yiguchen would naturally do it. Yiguchen glanced at the withered corpse of the Cold Sword Venerable. He discovered that there was still a origin ring on his finger. Yiguchen took off the origin ring. The restriction had long been removed. After a brief exploration, Yiguchen revealed a look of surprise. There were many things in the origin ring. First, there were densely packed milky white crystals. These were not ordinary crystal jades, but celestial chalcedony, also known as the king of crystal jades. It was also called celestial crystals. In these celestial crystals, the rich spiritual energy seemed to have turned into liquid and flowed. The amount of spiritual energy contained in one celestial crystal was equivalent to 100 crystal jades. And there were more than 1 million celestial crystals in the origin ring. In other words, it was more than 100 million crystal jades. This made Yiguchen speechless. One had to know that apart from those elixirs and treasures, there were only a few 100,000 crystal jades in his possession. Compared to 100 million crystal jades, it was like a drop of water. Not to mention, there were various healing quasi-sage elixirs, rare forging materials, and so on. Yi Guqin was speechless. There are even divine dwelling elixirs. Yi Guqin saw some dazzling elixirs. Divine dwelling elixirs were elixirs that could help a martial artist form a divine dwelling. In the Saint Origin dynasty, it was an extremely rare elixir. If news of it spread, the experts of the 7 major forces would fight for it. But in the eyes of the overlord forces, the divine dwelling elixirs were nothing. After all, there were many divine dwelling experts in those forces. I wonder if this elixir will be effective if it is given to Senior Feng. Yi Guqin suddenly thought of it. Could Feng Manlu, whose divine dwelling was broken, use the divine dwelling elixir to form a new divine dwelling? Yi Guqin kept this in mind. Suddenly, he discovered another item. This is... Yi Guqin's eyes narrowed. Chapter 641. That item was none other than a completely black sword token, and there was an indistinct strange beast engraved on it. It was the primordial sword token. Yi Guqin took it out and compared it with his own sword token. They were exactly the same. How many primordial sword tokens are there? Yi Guqin thought to himself. He put everything in the primordial ring into his own primordial ring. Then, he looked at Supremacy Ling Jian's corpse and said, "Sorry for the offense." The pitch-black heart demon flame surged out of his palm and enveloped the withered corpse. He wanted to refine the Enlightenment ancient tree. As time passed, Supremacy Ling Jian's corpse gradually turned into ashes and dissipated. A small tree that looked like it was carved out of jade was extracted and refined. This small tree was extremely strange. It was wrapped in a ball of green light that blocked the invasion of the flames. The surface of the small tree was imprinted with countless complicated trajectories and runes that were naturally formed. It carried a kind of ancient Tao that would make people feel enlightened. Collect. Yi Guqin's true qi burst out and wrapped around the Enlightenment ancient tree. At the same time, he forced out a few drops of his heart's blood essence and fused them into the small tree to begin refining. A few days later, Yi Guqin's blood essence had completely fused into the Enlightenment ancient tree. The Enlightenment ancient tree turned into a green stream of light and entered his dantian. Almost in an instant, Yi Guqin had a feeling. It was like a dusty glass that had been polished. His perception was extremely clear, as if everything in the world had its own rules and order. Previously, just the Enlightenment leaf alone could greatly increase Yi Guqin's strength. Not to mention now that the complete Enlightenment ancient tree had been refined by Yi Guqin. His mind was completely clear. Yi Guqin's gaze swept across the walls of the stone room. Those profound sword marks were instantly memorized by him. Not to mention the god-slaying sword technique, Yi Guqin also remembered the immortal slaying sword technique. Like the god-slaying sword technique, the immortal slaying sword technique also had 6 moves. After Yi Guqin had completely mastered the immortal murdering sword art, then, he could begin to try to fuse the 2 sword techniques into the Emperor-level sword technique, Immortal God Weep. Emperor-level sword arts, even in the South Horizon region, could be considered top quality. In some dynasty forces, it could even be regarded as a clan's ultimate technique and passed down. Yi Guqin had already plundered most of the fortuitous opportunities here, so he did not intend to stay here and meditate. He didn't want Su Jianshi to worry. Yi Guqin smiled faintly. Let's go back to the Sword Sect's tower. The quasi-sage pills I obtained should be helpful for Su Jianshi's recovery. In a flash, he left the Venerable One's cave. This time, Yi Guqin had gained a lot. It was a top-grade sacred medicine, the Enlightenment ancient tree. Immemorial sword token. God slaying, immortal slaying, and the fused immortal gods weep. There were also 1,000,000 heaven crystals, many quasi-sage pills, and materials in the origin ring. Yi Guqin's current wealth might be comparable to the sum of some low-grade dynasties. After leaving the Venerable One's cave, Yi Guqin also left the heavenly desolate plains and flew towards the Sword Sect's tower. However, he vaguely felt that something big would happen soon in the heavenly desolate plain's bottomless abyss. The demonic sword in the sky and the heavenly emperor in the dust seemed to be some kind of prophecy. Yiguchen shook his head. He couldn't explore these secrets yet. After a few days, Yiguchen finally returned to the Sword Sect's tower. Looking at the familiar Sword Whisper mountain range, Yiguchen smiled faintly. As soon as he walked to the mountain gate, the two disciples guarding the gate saw Yiguchen. They were pleasantly surprised and cupped their fists together. "Greetings, Senior Brother Yi." Yiguchen nodded faintly and went straight in. Seeing Yiguchen's back, the two disciples were excited. "Senior Brother Yi is finally back. This time, we'll teach that unruly girl a lesson." Yeah, that Yen Failing relied on the sect master's token to do whatever she wanted in the Sword Sect's tower. She's unruly, willful, arrogant, and despotic. She's detestable. The two disciples' words were full of disgust for Yen Failing. Yiguchen directly entered the inner court. Not long after, Yen Wushuang and the others received the news and found Yiguchen. Su Jianshi and Shui should be here. Are they okay? Yiguchen smiled faintly. Shui is fine. Although she's still unconscious, her breathing is stable. She's fine for now, but... Ji Ling bit her lip and stopped. Yiguchen frowned slightly. They only mentioned Shui and didn't mention Su Jianshi. Although Su Jianshi was severely injured, she should have recovered after a few days of recuperation. "I'll take you to see her," sighed Yen Wushuang. They brought Yiguchen to a small courtyard on a mountain peak. Yiguchen frowned when he saw Su Jianshi lying on the bed. Her aura was still weak. Su Jianshi was unconscious and her brows were tightly knitted. Her injuries were worse than before. He shifted his gaze and saw the whip mark on Su Jianshi's arm. "What's going on?" Yiguchen's expression changed. The whip mark wasn't there before. Clearly, someone had injured her later. But with Yiguchen's reputation in the Sword Sect's tower, who would dare to make a move against Su Jianshi? Even the Grand Elder, Qiu Shan, wouldn't lower himself to make a move against Su Jianshi. Yen Wushuang gnashed her teeth. "It's all because of Yen Failing." "Yen Failing?" Yiguchen frowned. Then, Yen Wushuang and the others told Yiguchen about Yen Failing. Yiguchen's face darkened after he heard what Yiguchen had to say. He wasn't someone who would vent his anger on others. But Yen Failing's actions were truly infuriating. She looked down on the disciples of the Sword Sect's tower and mocked them for being trash. She used the bewitching incense to kidnap the divine eagle and Blackie. She was arrogant and looked down on everyone. Su Jianshi wanted to stop her, but Yen Failing injured her. She even ignored Su Jianshi's injuries. She even forcefully occupied Su Jianshi's residence. Yiguchen said indifferently, "Take me to that courtyard." "Brother Yi, are you going to?" "But she has the sect master's token," said Chu Qingqi. "So what if she has the sect master's token? Are we going to let her do as she pleases in the Sword Sect's tower?" Yiguchen's voice was cold. Yen Wushuang also couldn't stand Yen Failing's actions, so she naturally supported Yiguchen. Yiguchen took out some quasi-sage pills and fed them to the unconscious Su Jianshi. Then, under the lead of Yen Wushuang and the others, they went to the courtyard. News of Yiguchen's return spread throughout the Sword Sect's tower. When they learned that Yiguchen was going to find Yen Failing, many inner court disciples followed behind him. They wanted to see Yiguchen vent his anger. Over the past few days, Yen Failing's actions had been showing off her superior attitude to others, which made them feel extremely disgusted. "Is this the place?" When Yiguchen arrived at the quiet mountain, the familiar voice of the divine eagle came from the courtyard. "Silly woman, if you can undo Grandpa Condor's seal, Grandpa Condor can torture you 100 times over. I'll treat you like a human pet and trample on you day and night." The childish voice was filled with anger. "Hee, since I've taken a fancy to you, you're my pet. No one can take you away." A sweet and clear voice sounded. Yi Guqin's face was cold as he shouted. Get out here. Zhenqi burst forth from Zhang Xian's body, and the entire mountain seemed to tremble. How dare you shout in front of Grandpa Condor's residence? A delicate voice rang out, and Ling Long's beautiful figure appeared in a flash. It was Yan Feiling. Chapter 642. Yan Feiling was dressed luxuriously and looked extraordinarily beautiful. Her skin was as white as jade, and it was obvious that she was born in a noble family. However, there was a trace of unruly arrogance on her pretty face, which somewhat ruined her beauty and gave off a domineering feeling. Is this princess's residence a place where you can yell as you please? Yan Feiling frowned and said coldly. Are you sure this is your residence? Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent. I don't care who it belongs to. Since I've taken a fancy to it, then it belongs to me. Yan Feiling raised her chin. Are the divine condor and Blackie yours as well? Yi Guqin's expression turned even colder. That's of course. To be able to be this princess's demon pet, it's their fortune. Yan Feiling crossed her arms in front of her chest, and said with a tender snort. So that's why you can be so arrogant and injure Su Jianshi. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. Su Jianshi. Is it that azure-clothed woman? It was a fair fight between me and her. She's too weak and was injured by me. Who's to blame? Yan Feiling snorted. A fair fight? Don't you have any shame? Can't you see how heavily injured Miss Su is? Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others were furious. Was Yan Feiling blind or something? Anyone with a discerning eye could see the injury, but she ignored it and said it was a fair fight. A fair fight? Then why don't we have a fair fight today? Yi Guqin was expressionless. There wasn't a trace of anger on his face. But those who were familiar with Yi Guqin knew that the calmer he was, the more furious he was. Who are you? Are you qualified to fight with me? I don't want to fight with a nobody. Yan Feiling looked at Yi Guqin from head to toe. Yi Guqin's aura was only in the 9 changes of the divine soul. Audacious. You dare call senior brother Yi a nobody? Some of the surrounding inner court students that had come to watch felt it was unfair, and they couldn't help but shout out. What? You're Yi Guqin? Yan Feiling's eyes widened in surprise. In the past few days, who was the name she had heard the most in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest? That was undoubtedly Yi Guqin. All kinds of rumors were flying around. Some said that Yi Guqin had a divine palace expert as a servant, and that he could casually kill a life and death chamber expert. Of course, Yan Feiling had always been dismissive of these rumors. She relied on the fact that she was born with a noble background and naturally looked down on people. She believed that these rumors were most likely false. After all, she had seen too many of these geniuses with undeserved fame. If you apologize sincerely, there might still be some leeway. Yi Guqin's eyes were cold. Yan Feiling was indeed loathsome and arrogant, but she was not an evil person. If she sincerely repented, Yi Guqin could punish her slightly. However, Yan Feiling chuckled when she heard that. Yi Guqin, how dare you ask me to apologize? Who am I? I didn't do anything wrong. Even if I did something wrong, it's your fault. I didn't do anything wrong. In that case, I won't show you any mercy. Yi Guqin's tone was ice cold. Show mercy? Ha, this princess doesn't need you to show mercy. Go ahead and attack. This princess wants to shatter those false rumors of yours in front of everyone. What do you mean by saying that the 9 transformations of the divine soul can instantly kill someone at the threshold of life and death? Yan Feiling's true qi suddenly surged, and a pair of gorgeous true qi wings appeared behind her. Her figure also turned into a swift afterimage. Holding a long whip in her hand, she tore through the air towards Yi Guqin. So fast. The pupils of the surrounding inner disciples shrank. A life and death chamber expert surpassed the 9 changes of the divine soul in all aspects. Minor entrance. Yiguchen's mouth was filled with a cold smile. She was only a minor entrance, yet she was so arrogant. But with Yan Feiling's temperament, it could be seen that she had not gone through any life and death experiences. She had broken through to the life and death chamber using some special method, similar to the wheel of life and death. Yiguchen didn't care about such a genius from the small Xian entrances. Are you stupid? Seeing Yiguchen's motionless body, Yan Feiling's mouth curved into a mocking smile. The long whip in her hand tore through the air. The shadow of the whip ruthlessly lashed towards Yiguchen. Yiguchen's feet moved. Using wave-like subtle steps, his body rippled like water. The shadow of the whip directly hit Yiguchen's body. But before Yan Feiling's eyes lit up with joy, the long whip directly penetrated and hit the shadow. In the next moment, Yiguchen's cold face appeared less than 3 meters in front of Yan Feiling. Is this the cultivation you're relying on? Yiguchen said coldly. His eyes were instantly swallowed by the color of blood, and at the same time, a pitch-black flame burned. The eye of Azura combined with the heart demon flame of Nirvana. Ah! Yan Feiling's face instantly turned pale. She felt countless illusions of Azura and all kinds of horrifying scenes in her mind. Yan Feiling had been spoiled since she was a child. She had never suffered hardships, so her temperament was naturally weak. She was easily affected by the eye of Azura and the heart demon flame. In the blink of an eye, Yan Feiling felt like she had fallen into an illusion. The long whip lashed out in all directions, and her true chi was chaotic. Yiguchen showed no mercy. His true chi surged in his body as he ruthlessly kicked Yan Feiling's body. Puchi! He spat out a mouthful of blood, which woke Yan Feiling up at the same time. How dare you hurt me? After breaking free from the illusion, Yan Feiling's face was still pale with fear. However, she felt a burning pain in her abdomen. She let out a high-pitched scream. Yiguchen was expressionless. He moved his feet slightly and continued to move forward. He ruthlessly kicked out again. Puchi! He kicked Yan Feiling's abdomen again. Yan Feiling's face turned pale, and she spat out another mouthful of blood. I'm going to cripple you. Yan Feiling gritted her teeth. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He stepped forward again and waved his hand. Slap! A powerful slap landed on Yan Feiling's face and sent her flying. She was stunned by the slap, and she saw stars. You get angry when you're bullied? Then, when you bully others, have you ever thought about them? Yiguchen's expression was cold. Every word he said was heart-wrenching. Slap! 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 After 3 slaps, Yan Feiling's true chi was about to dissipate. Her beautiful cheeks were bruised, and the corners of her lips were cracked. Blood flowed out. However, what made her even angrier was Yiguchen's words. They were like steel needles that pierced her heart. It's none of your business. What's my status? What's your status? Yan Feiling said forcefully, unrepentant. You're incurable. Yiguchen's true chi gathered in his body, and he ruthlessly punched out. If you dare to attack again, I have your sect leader's token. Although Yan Feiling was unruly, she was scared. Seeing Yiguchen's attack, she could not help but take out the sect leader's token. Yan Wushuang and the others were stunned. Seeing the sect leader's token was like seeing the person. However, Yiguchen said coldly, I believe that the sect leader is a person who can distinguish right from wrong. If he's here, he won't stop you. As soon as he finished speaking, he punched out. Yan Feiling continued to spit out blood. She was sent flying and crashed heavily on the ground. Her luxurious dress was torn in many places, revealing her snow-white skin. She collapsed on the ground, her face covered in dirt. Heh! Is this all you're capable of? Yiguchen stood with his hands behind his back and said calmly. Puff! Yan Feiling's blood rushed to her head. She was so angry that she spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Chapter 643. Looking at Yan Feiling, who had fainted on the ground, no one had any sympathy for her. Not a single person in the crowd showed any sympathy. Instead, they all had carefree and gloating expressions on their faces. Over the past few days, this young girl had always had her nose up in the air. Relying on her cultivation at the Life and Death Gate and the sect master's token, she was arrogant and despotic. Now that they had seen Yi Guqin teach him a lesson, all of the inner yard disciples felt happy, as if they had vented their anger. As expected of senior brother Yi, he crushed the minor gate like it was an ant. While the inner yard disciples were happy, they were also amazed by Yi Guqin's strength. They couldn't help but admire him even more. At this moment, the divine condor and Blackie ran out from the courtyard. "Ha, brat Yi, you did well. This silly girl needs to be taught a lesson." The divine condor laughed. Yi Guqin went up and found that the divine condor and Blackie had been sealed. Yi Guqin raised his hand, and his true qi surged out and broke the seal. "This place is rich in spiritual qi. Bring Su Jianshi and the others back," Yi Guqin said casually. "Brother Yi, then she." Chu Qingqi glanced at the unconscious Yan Feiling. "Throw her anywhere." Yi Guqin didn't even look at her. Chu Qingqi nodded. With Yi Guqin's lesson, Yan Feiling would probably restrain herself. At least for now, she didn't dare to provoke Yi Guqin. Afterward, Yi Guqin brought Su Jianshi and Shui back to the courtyard. After taking many quasi-sage pills and healing pills, Su Jianshi finally woke up. Seeing Yi Guqin in front of her, she naturally missed him. Shui also woke up, but she was in a daze. She seemed to have forgotten that she had turned into the Heaven Weeping Witch and killed the white-robed old man. "Big brother, where is this? Where are Sister Qiqiao and the others?" Shui asked in a daze. "This is the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest. Qiqiao went to a very safe place," Yi Guqin said. "Is that so?" Shui nodded. She had no memory of her transformation into a witch at all. Yi Guqin thought to himself. Shui's identity was too mysterious. As for her identity as the Heaven Weeping Witch, it was obvious that she absolutely could not reveal it. Yi Guqin thought to himself that he would definitely not let Shui transform into the Heaven's Weeping Witch form in the future. Big brother, Shui is hungry. Shui pouted her pink lips, her little face slightly red, and her little hand clutched her little stomach. She looked rather adorable. "Okay." Yi Guqin couldn't help but laugh. After Su Jianshi and Shui woke up, their injuries stabilized. Yi Guqin finally relaxed. He was prepared to challenge the Sword Sect Pagoda again. This was because the complete version of the Sword Sect's ultimate technique, the Reincarnation Sword Lotus, was on the 9th level. Even on the 8th level, there was only an incomplete 72-leaf Death Sword Lotus. Yi Guqin had previously guessed that in order to enter the 9th level, apart from strength, one would also need the qualifications of the Sword Sect Echelon. At that time, Yi Guqin had the qualifications to join the echelon, but he did not have the strength. But now, Yi Guqin's strength was comparable to a great profound martial realm expert, so he had the qualifications to explore the 9th level. The news of Yi Guqin heading to the Sword Sect Pagoda also came from the inner court. Many disciples came to watch. They were very curious about whether Yi Guqin would be able to enter the 9th level. Su Jianshi, Shui, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and almost all the disciples of the inner court had gathered in front of the Sword Sect Pagoda. Wind's sweeping pavilion had granted Yi Guqin the qualifications to enter the Sword Sect Pagoda as he wished. Yi Guqin did not hesitate and directly entered the Sword Sect Pagoda. Soon, the first level lit up. Following that, the second and third levels lit up one after another. It did not take long for him to reach the 8th level. Seeing his speed, Yi Guqin's expression changed. Yan Wushuang and the others were stunned. Yi Gu Chen's speed was not as fast as this last time. The most important thing was that the difficulty of Yi Gu Chen's challenge was not on the same level as theirs. Back then, I actually wanted to compete with him in the Sword Sect Pagoda. Yan Wushuang recalled the time when she was not convinced by Yi Gu Chen and wanted to challenge him to a duel. Now that she thought about it, she had overestimated herself. This guy is a monster. Yan Wushuang couldn't help but mutter. While everyone outside was shocked by Yi Gu Chen's speed in the Sword Sect Pagoda. Yi Gu Chen also arrived at the 8th level. It was a world of swords filled with tens of thousands of swords. This was also the place where Wind's Sweeping Pavilion went into seclusion all year round to comprehend the unity of man and sword. The last time he came, Yi Gu Chen did not have the slightest comprehension of the unity of man and sword. But now, Yi Gu Chen's comprehension of the unity of man and sword had gradually deepened. After refining the Enlightenment Ancient Tree, Yi Gu Chen came to this world of swords and gained a deeper understanding. Using the body as the sword, controlling the sword with the heart, and the sword will follow the heart, Yi Gu Chen already had the demonic talent of the sword demon, and he had the support of the Tree of Enlightenment. With the help of the Enlightenment Ancient Tree, his comprehension could be called monstrous. Yi Gu Chen was not in a hurry to challenge the 9th level. Instead, he used this world of swords to comprehend the unity of man and sword. Feng's Sweeping Pavilion's figure appeared in the distance with a faint smile on his face. His comprehension has improved by a large margin and his comprehension of the unity of man and sword has deepened. This is good news. If Gu Zun has comprehended the Supreme Blade to perfection, I'm afraid that only the unity of man and sword can contend against him, Feng's Sweeping Pavilion muttered to himself. One had to know that Yu Bufan, who fought against him back then, had only comprehended 30% of the Supreme Blade. With Gu Zun's dedication to the Supreme Blade, if he really comprehended it to perfection, it would be difficult for him to find a match in the younger generation. While Yi Gu Chen was comprehending the unity of man and sword on the 8th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda, Yan Feiling, who had fainted, had finally woken up. When she opened her eyes and saw the dilapidated houses around her, she almost vomited blood. Damn it, he actually left this princess in this place. Yan Feiling was injured. The house was extremely dilapidated and there were even some bugs crawling on the bed. There were even some that crawled onto Yan Feiling's body, causing her to let out an inhuman shriek. Yi Gu Chen, you will regret treating me like this. Yan Feiling took out some recovery medicine from her origin ring and swallowed it. After recovering some of her strength, she hurriedly walked out of the house. At the same time, she took out a jade slip to send a message. A brief moment later, joy appeared on her face. They're coming. That's great. With Big Brother Xiaotang's strength at the grand threshold, even Yi Gu Chen won't be a match for him. Yan Feiling's eyes were filled with admiration. It was hard to imagine that someone as unruly as her would reveal such an expression. From this, one could see how charming her big brother Xiaotang was. Yi Gu Chen stayed on the 8th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda for more than 10 days. In these 10 days, Yi Gu Chen's comprehension of the unity of man and sword had soared. If it was said that he only had some insights before, then he had now reached the brink of enlightenment. The seed of the sword heart in his heart also showed signs of sprouting. The seed of the sword heart was formed from the myriad sword codex. The first volume cultivated the sword vein, while the second volume condensed the sword heart. The seed of the sword heart had taken root, which meant that Yi Gu Chen had comprehended the enlightened sword heart. The seed of the sword heart had sprouted, which meant that he had comprehended the unity of man and sword. Yi Gu Chen was only a short distance away from the unity of man and sword. After more than 10 days of sitting cross-legged, Yi Gu Chen opened his eyes. There was sword chi flickering in his eyes. Although he hadn't fully comprehended the unity of man and sword, he wasn't far from it. Yi Gu Chen was looking forward to how strong he would be after comprehending the unity of man and sword. After all, Feng Manlu had relied on the unity of man and sword to possess strength comparable to the 6th layer of the divine dwelling realm. It was simply heaven-defying. Chapter 644. Not bad, Feng Manlu walked over from a short distance away. Senior Feng. Yi Guqin rose to his feet. You're not far away from becoming one with the sword. If you can fully comprehend it, you'll have a high chance of winning at the top of the Forbidden City, Feng Manlu said. Yi Guqin nodded. Indeed. If the enlightened sword heart only increased his comprehension, then the enlightened sword heart would only increase his comprehension. In that case, the unity of man and sword would be a powerful killing technique. If he could comprehend it, it would be of great help to Yi Guqin in improving his strength. Are you ready to challenge the 9th floor? Feng Manlu asked with a faint smile. Yes. Senior Feng, this is for you. Yi Guqin suddenly thought of something and wiped his origin ring. He handed the jade bottle to Feng Manlu. Feng Manlu opened the jade bottle and sniffed it. He was slightly stunned. This is... Feng Manlu paused. Divine dwelling pills, Yi Guqin said truthfully. Feng Manlu was slightly taken aback. He then said, it seems like you've finished exploring the cave abode. That's right. I wonder if the divine dwelling pills will help Senior Feng's shattered divine dwelling? Yi Guqin asked. My divine dwelling has been destroyed by Xian Wuji. It'll be extremely difficult for me to reform it. However, I can still give it a try, Feng Manlu said with a smile. That's good. Yi Guqin also smiled. Feng Manlu was already so powerful when his divine dwelling was shattered. If he could reform his divine dwelling, how powerful would he be? Soon after, Yi Guqin found the entrance to the 9th floor. He took a deep breath and activated the ancient god technique. The true qi in his body burst out. At the same time, the golden sword sect sequence insignia on the back of his hand lit up. Break! As soon as he finished speaking, the door opened. Outside the sword sect tower, the 9th floor, which had never lit up before, suddenly lit up. He passed. Senior brother Yi has made it to the 9th floor. All the inner court disciples widened their eyes. They were so excited that they almost suffocated. Yi Guqin, the hero in their hearts, had once again created a miracle. The 9th floor of the Sword Sect Pagoda was a place where even Feng Manlu, Yan Chang'e, and Qiu Shan, the 3 great powerhouses, could not enter. But Yi Guqin had barged in. Yi Guqin has created another miracle. Yan Wushuang covered her red lips with her hand. She was happy for Yi Guqin. Su Jianchu's lips curled into a smile. Yi Guqin always seemed to be able to create miracles. Perhaps he really can defeat Di Haoyan. Su Jianchu suddenly thought. But in an instant, she suppressed it and shook her head slightly. Regardless of whether Yi Guqin could defeat Di Haoyan, Su Jianchu didn't want Yi Guqin to risk his life for her. Just as everyone in the outside world was in awe, after entering the 9th floor, Yi Guqin sized up the space around him. It was different from the various strange spaces that he had imagined. The 9th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda was very simple. It looked like an ordinary person's residence. There were beds and wooden tables, but they were all covered in a thick layer of dust. A painting hung on one of the walls. It was very simple and plain. There was nothing strange about it. Even Yi Guqin was a little confused for a moment. He walked up to the painting and looked at it. His eyes suddenly narrowed. What was drawn on the scroll was a green lotus. However, that green lotus actually had 360 petals. This is the complete version of the reincarnation sword lotus. Yi Guqin's eyes were filled with joy. His comprehension was superb. Coupled with the fact that he had refined the Enlightenment ancient tree, he quickly understood that this painting was the complete version of the reincarnation sword lotus. There were 360 leaves. As for Yi Guqin, he could only cast 36 leaves at the moment. It was hard to imagine how terrifying the 360-leafed sword lotus would be if he could truly cultivate it. Yi Guqin looked down. There was a signature at the end of the painting. The painting of the reincarnation lotus. 6 generations of sword grandmasters, a misty reign, left behind by Ren Pingsheng. 6 generations of sword grandmasters, Ren Pingsheng. Ye Guqin finally knew who the creator of the reincarnation sword lotus was. He discovered that each generation of sword grandmasters had their own unique techniques. 8 generations of sword grandmasters, Yi Tianqing's 108,000 heaven-ripping sword souls. 7 generations of sword grandmasters, the universal Qi sacred sword. 6 generations of sword grandmasters, Ren Pingsheng's reincarnation sword lotus. Ye Guqin was very curious about what kind of existence the sword sect lineage was. Moreover, the fact that he could leave the reincarnation sword lotus in the form of a painting was enough to show Jian Pingsheng's extraordinary sword cultivation. None of the generations of sword grandmasters were ordinary people. Ye Guqin sat cross-legged before the painting of the reincarnation lotus and began to comprehend it. Time passed. Another half a month passed. Ye Guqin still did not come out from the sword sect pagoda. Yan Wushuang and the others in the outside world would come to take a look every day. As for Yan Feiling, she was much more well-behaved and did not dare to be arrogant and despotic in the sword sect pagoda forest. One day, 3 figures arrived outside the sword sect's forest of pagodas. There were 2 middle-aged men and a young man. One of the middle-aged men had a weathered face and was vaguely handsome. He was dressed in plain clothes and looked a little travel-worn. The other middle-aged man was dressed in a bright yellow python robe. He looked like someone with an extraordinary status. The remaining young man was dressed in luxurious clothes. His skin was fair and he was extraordinarily handsome. Third brother, is this the sword sect pagoda forest? It's not bad. The man in the bright yellow python robe smiled faintly, but there was a hint of contempt in his smile. It's just a small sect. It's not worthy of your attention. The weathered man in plain clothes shook his head slightly. Not at all. Third uncle, you're the master of a sect. Your status is extraordinary. The handsome young man smiled, but there was a hint of playfulness in his tone. The 3 of them entered immediately. That's, the sect master is here. Some disciples of the sword sect pagoda forest were stunned when they saw the weathered man in plain clothes. Most of the disciples had never seen this elusive sect master before. However, there were still a small number of disciples who knew him. In just a short while, the news of the sect master's return spread throughout the sect. What? Father is back. Yan Wushuang could not wait and rushed out immediately. All the inner court disciples, elders, and even Feng Manlu and Qiu Shan appeared. When Yan Wushuang saw the weathered but still handsome man, tears flowed from her eyes. Father! Yan Wushuang hugged Yan Chang'e like a swallow returning to its nest. Wushuang, long time no see. The weathered man was the master of the sword sect pagoda forest, Yan Chang'e. He looked at Yan Wushuang who was sobbing. The eyes of the handsome young man who was dressed in luxurious clothes suddenly lit up. He looked up and down at Yan Wushuang's delicate body, especially her pair of snow-white long legs. The smile on the handsome young man's face became wider. Ha, this must be my niece. The man in the python robe smiled faintly. Yan Wushuang stopped sobbing and blushed slightly. After all, she had always been indifferent. However, she was crying in public at this moment. As he looked at Yan Wushuang whose cheeks were still flushed, a wisp of surprise flashed in the eyes of the handsome young man. A girl as beautiful as Yan Wushuang was rare even in the dynasty where he was from. The handsome young man could not take his eyes off her pair of exquisite legs. Yan Wushuang frowned slightly when she felt the handsome young man's strange gaze. She regained her composure. Father, they are. Yan Wushuang was confused when she saw the man in the python robe and the handsome young man. Yan Chang'e sighed. Right at this moment, a clear and delicate voice that carried pleasant surprise sounded out. Brother Xiaotang, second uncle, you are here. Yan Wushuang's face darkened when she heard the voice. As expected, Yan Feiling appeared. Chapter 645. Right now, the atmosphere was a little strange. Yen Feiling was hated by everyone in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. If it wasn't for Yi Guqin teaching her a lesson, Yen Feiling would have been even more arrogant. But now, it seemed that Yen Feiling was related to the man in the python robe. What was the relationship between the man in the python robe and Yen Chang'e? Yen Wushuang cast a puzzled look. Yen Chang'e sighed and said, "Shuang, quickly greet your second uncle, cousin, and cousin." "WH. What?" Yen Wushuang was stunned and her face froze. Not only her, but all the other inner court disciples' faces froze. These people were actually Yen Chang'e's relatives. But as the master of a sect, Yen Chang'e seemed to have never had any relatives. He only had one daughter, Yen Wushuang. He didn't even have a wife. "Father, what's going on?" Yen Wushuang was completely confused and didn't understand. "Third brother, so you haven't told your niece everything?" The man in the python robe said. Sigh. Yen Chang'e let out a long sigh and said, "Shuang, come with me." This was a private matter of Yen Chang'e and the others. Naturally, it wasn't good to talk about it in public. The rest of the people were also very tactful, and each of them dispersed. In a quiet courtyard, Yen Wushuang stared at Yen Chang'e and said, "Father, can you tell Shuang, everything?" Beside Yen Chang'e, the man in the python robe, the handsome young man, and Yen Feiling were all there. He sighed and said, "Shuang, I didn't tell you because I want you to live a carefree life. Actually, I'm from the Swallow Cloud dynasty." Yen Chang'e said. "What? Swallow Cloud dynasty?" Yen Wushuang's mind buzzed. The Swallow Cloud dynasty was different from the Saint Origin dynasty. The Saint Origin dynasty was only a low-class dynasty, but the Swallow Cloud dynasty was a high-class dynasty. The retired emperor of the Swallow Cloud dynasty was a top honorable. The retired emperor is actually your grandfather. Yen Chang'e said in a complicated tone. "What? What's going on?" Yen Wushuang's mind was a mess. She was from the Swallow Cloud dynasty, and the retired emperor was her grandfather. After that, Yen Chang'e told Yen Wushuang everything. It turned out that Yen Chang'e was once a prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. He had been engaged to the eldest princess of the Phoenix Nye dynasty since he was young. However, during one of Yen Chang'e's private patrols, he accidentally met an ordinary woman. Sometimes, falling in love was so unexpected. Yen Chang'e, who was deeply in love with one person, wanted to break off the engagement with the eldest princess. But how could the Phoenix Nye dynasty agree? This was a slap to their face. Moreover, the Phoenix Nye dynasty was a top dynasty with a false saint expert. In terms of strength, they were stronger than the Swallow Cloud dynasty. In the end, the eldest princess forced Yen Wushuang's mother to her death. However, before her death, Yen Wushuang had already given birth to a child. The only request of Yen Chang'e's lover, that ordinary woman, before she died, was for Yen Chang'e to take Yen Wushuang away from the clamor of the dynasty and live the rest of their lives in peace. Only after her lover was forced to die did the royal princess stop pursuing the matter. However, Yen Chang'e insisted on leaving the dynasty. He abandoned his identity as a prince and lived in seclusion in the Saint Yuan dynasty. In the end, he became the master of the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest. The story was very simple, but also very sad. Yen Wushuang did not have a mother since she was young, so she did not know that she was born like this. Her birth mother was forced to death by the eldest princess of the Phoenix Nye dynasty. "Wushuang, I have let you down. I cannot avenge your mother. The Swallow Cloud dynasty will not allow me to take revenge on the Phoenix Nye dynasty." Yen Chang'e sighed. In fact, he was the one who suffered the most. "Sigh, third brother, niece, let it go. The Phoenix Nye dynasty is a top dynasty. It is not something that our Swallow Cloud dynasty can offend. The eldest princess is now the empress of the Phoenix Nye dynasty. Moreover, I brought Xiaotang and the others to participate in the preliminaries of the prodigy tournament. I found out that the eldest princess's daughter, Princess Fengxi, will also participate. It is said that her strength has reached the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. He was Yan Chang'e's second brother, Yan Bailin, the prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. The handsome young man was his son, Yan Xiaotang, the crown prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Yan Feiling was Princess Feiling of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Yan Bailin brought the two of them to the Saint Yuan dynasty to find out about the preliminaries of the prodigy tournament. Secondly, Yan Chang'e's father, the retired emperor, had said that Yan Chang'e could return to the dynasty. Therefore, they found Yan Chang'e, who was traveling outside. Yan Feiling was unruly and quick-witted. She wanted to explore the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest and obtained the token from Yan Chang'e. When the truth was revealed, Yan Wushuang was absent-minded. In that case, Yan Wushuang was also Princess Wushuang of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Third brother, when the preliminaries of the prodigy tournament are over, take your niece and return to the dynasty. After all, father misses you very much. Yan Bailin said. Sigh, I'm ashamed. Yan Chang'e sighed. Then, Yan Chang'e asked Yan Wushuang to bring Yan Xiaotang and the others to visit the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Yan Wushuang walked alone in front, looking absent-minded. Yan Xiaotang and Yan Feiling followed behind. Brother Xiaotang, let me tell you. There's a person called Yiguchen in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. He's so despicable that he dared to hurt me. Brother Xiaotang, you must avenge me. Yan Feiling tugged at the corner of Yan Xiaotang's clothes. Oh, can he hurt you? I don't think there are many prodigies in the life and death challenge realm in such a low-level dynasty. Yan Xiaotang said indifferently. The arrogance in his words could not be concealed. After all, he came from a high-tier dynasty and had the noble identity of a prince. Coming to the Saint Origin dynasty, he naturally had an invisible sense of pride. That brat, he has the 9 changes of godly soul. Yan Feiling stuttered, feeling a little ashamed. What? Even the 9 changes of godly soul can defeat you. Sister Feiling, you have to cultivate well and not play around. Yan Xiaotang shook his head. Instinctively, he did not think that Yiguchen was strong. Instead, he thought that Yan Feiling was playing around and neglected her cultivation, which was why she lost to Yiguchen. Yan Feiling could not say for sure. She had used all her strength, but she was still crushed by Yiguchen. She could only stutter, anyway, Brother Xiaotang will definitely not lose to that brat. Yan Xiaotang smiled and shook his head. He had some thoughts about Yan Feiling before. However, after seeing Yan Wushuang, Yan Feiling paled in comparison. Sister Shuang, why don't you bring me to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest to take a look? Yan Xiaotang smiled amiably. Shuang is not someone you can call. Yan Wushuang's expression returned to indifference. The only people who could call her Shuang were Yan Chang'e, Feng Manlu, Ji Ling and Yiguchen. Although Yiguchen would never call her that. Cousin can at least call me that, right? Yan Xiaotang's expression was slightly awkward. Yan Wushuang was silent. Yan Xiaotang wanted to get closer and said, Cousin, I heard that there are 3 great opportunities in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest that can measure a person's potential and cultivation base. Cousin also wants to give it a try. Is it possible? Yan Wushuang nodded slightly. Although the 3 great opportunities were not easily opened, Yan Chang'e had already instructed her to treat Yan Xiaotang and the others well. Seeing this, Yan Xiaotang looked calm on the surface, but a hint of joy flashed in his eyes. How difficult can it be in such a small place of fortune? With my strength and talent, I will definitely be able to create 3 records. At that time, Shuang will have a whole new level of respect for me. She will know that the so-called heaven's pride in her eyes is nothing compared to me. Yan Xiaotang thought to himself confidently. Chapter 646. The three great places of opportunity in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were the Forest of 10,000 Swords, the Solitary Sword Cliff, and the Sword Sect Pagoda. Yan Wushuang brought Yan Xiaotang and the rest to the Forest of 10,000 Swords. Looking around, there were over 10,000 swords in a wide valley. They were shining with a cold light and their sword chi was soaring into the sky. It was as if they could cut one's eyes with a glance. This is the Forest of 10,000 Swords. The more talented a sword cultivator is, the more they can resonate with the swords, Yan Wushuang said indifferently. Ah, it's not a bad place, Yan Xiaotang said with a smile. However, there was a hint of disdain in his eyes. Such a place of opportunity was nothing in the eyes of a prince from a high-class dynasty. However, in order to leave a good impression on Yan Wushuang, he did not show any disdain. I wonder how many swords have resonated with you? Yan Xiaotang asked with a smile. 5,000, Yan Wushuang said indifferently. Ha, that's great. I'll try my best to see how many swords I can resonate with. Yan Xiaotang smiled casually. It was as if it was an extremely simple matter to him. I want to try too. Yan Feiling was also eager to try. Apart from Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, and the rest, including the inner court disciples, came over. There were two reasons why so many people were watching. Firstly, the Forest of 10,000 Swords was not open during normal times. Secondly, these disciples also wanted to know exactly how big the gap was between them and the prodigies from the high-ranked empires. Yan Feiling was the first to enter the Forest of 10,000 Swords. The Forest of 10,000 Swords seemed to have revived in an instant. Clanging sounds of swords could be heard and rays of cold light suddenly spread out. Ah! Yan Feiling's exclamation could be heard from the Forest of 10,000 Swords. She shuttled through the Forest of 10,000 Swords. In the end, she only managed to resonate with 4,000 swords. Her dress was torn in many places and she retreated in a sorry state. What kind of place of opportunity is this? I don't care about it. Yan Feiling was a little embarrassed. She was actually angry because the sword resonance she triggered was actually not as good as Yan Wushuang's. Yan Feiling gritted her teeth and glared at Yan Wushuang. Yan Wushuang ignored her. Cousin Feiling, don't be angry. You're not a sword cultivator in the first place, so this kind of test is naturally useless to you. Yan Xiaotang consoled. Brother Xiaotang is still the best to Feiling. Yan Feiling's beautiful eyes revealed an infatuated look. Ha, it's my turn now. Yan Xiaotang laughed as he stepped into the Forest of 10,000 Swords. Wan Jianlin's swift and fierce sword chi was triggered once again. However, Yan Xiaotang's vigorous true chi spread out, and the aura of the great entrance gushed out, temporarily suppressing the swift and fierce sword chi. It's actually the great entrance. Many of the spectating inner academy disciples had astonished expressions on their faces. Even Yan Wushuang's beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Although she didn't have any feelings for Yan Xiaotang, she couldn't help but admit that a genius from a high-tier empire was indeed extraordinary. Next, Yan Xiaotang began to resonate with the sword. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, without any doubt, he directly broke Yan Wushuang's result. In the end, a total of 7,000 swords let out clanking sounds, shaking half of the swordsmanship-seeking mountain range. So strong! Many of the inner academy disciples exclaimed. After 7,000 swords, Yan Xiaotang also felt that it was a little strenuous. After all, to resonate with the sword, one's understanding and compatibility with the sword wasn't the main factor. Yan Xiaotang could only resonate 7,000 swords, and that was his limit. Yan Xiaotang immediately withdrew and walked to Yan Wushuang's side with a faint smile. It's a pity that I'm not in a good state today. Otherwise, I would be able to resonate with even more swords. But I'm sorry to break my cousin's record. Yan Xiaotang didn't say it directly. However, the pride and arrogance hidden within his words was clearly revealed. In Yan Xiaotang's imagination, there shouldn't be anyone in the younger generation of the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest who could achieve 7,000 swords. Wasn't such an outstanding result enough for Yan Wushuang to see his strength clearly? However, Yan Wushuang's expression was still calm. So what if it was 7,000 swords? Back then, when Yiguchen resounded with 10,000 swords, he didn't show off anything. Not to mention during the Inner Academy ranking battle. Yiguchen's words caused 10,000 swords in the sword forest to rise into the air and transform into a long dragon that traversed the sky. Yan Wushuang still couldn't forget such a shocking scene. In comparison, Yan Xiaotang's result was somewhat pitiful. However, because Yan Xiaotang was a relative, Yan Wushuang couldn't expose him and could only remain silent. However, in Yan Xiaotang's eyes, this silence was like sulking. He smiled gently. "Cousin, don't be disappointed. The reason why I have such a stunning result is because of my long years of cultivation. If you return to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, you will naturally be able to obtain the best cultivation environment." In the surroundings, Ji Ling and the others wanted to say something but stopped. They also wanted to say that Yan Xiaotang's result of 7,000 swords was really nothing. Because there was still Yiguchen's record of 10,000 swords. However, seeing that Yan Wushuang didn't say anything, Ji Ling and the others couldn't say anything. "Alright, cousin, don't be disappointed anymore. Bring me to the second place of opportunity." Yan Xiaotang smiled. The second place of opportunity was the one-sword cliff. When Yan Xiaotang arrived at the cliff with the sword mark, a surprised expression appeared on his face. What a profound sword concept. This place is quite extraordinary. Yan Xiaotang said. In his heart, he looked down on the sword forest and other places of opportunity. However, the one-sword cliff was indeed a little different. There were two sword scars on the precipice. One was simple and profound, while the other was quiet and profound, carrying a sense of poignant beauty. There are only two sword marks on the one-sword cliff. Even father and the others couldn't leave a sword mark on it, Yan Wushuang said. There was only one ancient sword mark on the one-sword cliff. The second mark was naturally left behind by Yiguchen's pathos of heaven. Oh, it's so strange. Yan Xiaotang was also eager to try. He immediately drew out his sword and infused it with powerful sword qi. Heavenly Mystery Sword Technique. The violent sword qi bombarded the one-sword cliff. The fluctuations caused once again shocked the surrounding people. Supreme King Level Sword Technique. Many disciples exclaimed. Although the Sword Sect Tower Forest also had king-level sword techniques, they were only of lower or middle grade. Even in the Saint Origin dynasty, supreme-grade king-level sword skills were extremely rare. Boom! After the violent tremor, the one-sword cliff was still the same as before. Yan Xiaotang was slightly disappointed, but he didn't care. After all, Yan Wushuang said that even Yan Chang'e couldn't leave a sword mark on it. Since that was the case, the two sword marks must have been left behind by ancient sword experts. Seeing that he couldn't leave a sword mark, Yan Xiaotang's heart moved and he began to comprehend the sword essence of the two sword marks. These two sword scars should have come from two peak experts in the way of the sword. One of them is simple and natural. It's very profound. Even I find it difficult to comprehend it. However, the concept of the other sword scar is extremely poignant and beautiful. To be able to fuse emotions into the sword, such a cultivation in the way of the sword is shocking and admirable. If the expert who left behind this sword scar was still alive, Xiaotang would really want to kneel on the ground and take him as my master. Yan Xiaotang sighed and seemed to approve of the poignant sword mark. Yan Wushuang looked at him with a strange gaze. The rest of the inner domain disciples also exchanged glances with each other. The atmosphere was indescribably strange. This was because the sword mark wasn't left by an ancient sword expert. It was left by Yiguchen. Chapter 647. Yan Xiaotang did not pay much attention to the expressions of the others. Instead, he was immersed in that poignant sword intent. The deeper he went, the more amazed he was. In his eyes, that poignant sword move had already surpassed the scope of swordsmanship. It was a form of art. That's right. It was a poignant art. To be able to fuse sword and emotion so perfectly, in Yan Xiaotang's eyes, it must be something that only the peerless sword cultivators of ancient times could do. Not to mention Yan Xiaotang, even people like Yan Feiling were affected by this poignant concept. Brother Xiaotang, Feiling also felt the poignant beauty of this sword mark. Feiling really admires the senior who left this sword mark. Yan Feiling's eyes were slightly red, as if she was moved. The expressions of Yan Wushuang and the others became more and more strange. If Yan Feiling knew that the one who left this sword mark was Yi Guqin, who she despised and hated, that scene would definitely be very exciting. Sigh, it's a pity that I was born at the wrong time. I really want to meet this senior. My sword techniques are far from 1 in 10,000 of this senior. If he can appear in front of me, I will immediately kneel down and beg to be his disciple. Yan Xiaotang sighed again. He wanted to make it seem as if he resonated with the sword mark. He wanted to use this to move Yan Wushuang's heart. He wanted to prove that he was also a person with deep feelings. However, Yan Wushuang's expression still did not change and she remained silent. She could tell that Yan Xiaotang was trying to attract her attention by doing all these. However, this method was really low-level. Let's go to the last place of opportunity next. Yan Xiaotang smiled. When he saw that Yan Wushuang's expression did not change, he thought that she was pretending to be reserved. Even so, Yan Xiaotang wanted to perform well in the last round. He wanted to completely win the heart of the beauty. Yan Wushuang sighed helplessly. She could only bring Yan Xiaotang to the Sword Sect Pagoda. Yi Guqin was still in seclusion on the 9th floor of the Sword Sect Pagoda. However, only Yi Guqin could enter the 9th floor alone, so Yan Wushuang was not worried that Yan Xiaotang would disturb Yi Guqin. Is this the Sword Sect Pagoda? It's not bad. Yan Xiaotang smiled faintly. There were countless of such cultivation towers in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. There was contempt in his eyes. May I know which level of the Sword Sect Pagoda cousin has passed? Yan Xiaotang asked. The 7th floor, Yan Wushuang said indifferently. Oh, the 7th level? That's not bad. Cousin, I'll challenge this Sword Sect Pagoda today and see if I can ascend to the 9th level. Yan Xiaotang smiled lightheartedly. His tone was filled with extreme confidence. He was a prodigy of heaven from a high-rank dynasty. Could a mere cultivation pagoda stump him? Yan Wushuang and the others didn't say anything. The other inner academy disciples also kept quiet in a tacit understanding. Actually, they did not like Yan Xiaotang. Although Yan Xiaotang didn't act like Yan Feiling, he didn't act all high and mighty. However, that faint sense of arrogance made people feel very uncomfortable. Then, Yan Xiaotang and Yan Feiling began to break through. When Yan Feiling reached the 6th level, she was sent out. Damn it! Yan Feiling's expression turned ugly. She was the spoiled Princess Feiling in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. She didn't expect that she would be repeatedly thwarted in this tiny low-rank dynasty. First, she was ruthlessly abused by Yi Guqin. Then, she was inferior to Yan Wushuang in these fortuitous encounters. This meant that Yan Wushuang's talent was far higher than hers. If Yan Wushuang had Yan Feiling's cultivation resources, she would probably be an expert of the grand entrance by now. Don't be discouraged. Yan Xiaotang casually comforted her before he began to break through. The 1st level lit up, the 2nd level lit up, the 3rd level lit up. Yan Wushuang and the others were extremely astonished by the speed at which he passed through the hurdles. He wasn't much slower than Yi Guqin. However, they immediately recalled that Yi Guqin's difficulty was 10 times that of an ordinary person. Yan Xiaotang's difficulty was 10 times simpler than Yi Guqin's. However, his speed was only close to Yi Guqin's. Thinking up to here, Yan Wushuang felt even more admiration for Yi Guqin. The other inner court disciples also exclaimed in admiration. Yan Feiling snorted when she saw this scene and crossed her arms in front of her chest. Now, you know the difference between you and Big Brother Xiaotang, right? The prodigies of a high-rank dynasty can't be compared to the prodigies of a low-rank dynasty. Yan Feiling thought that those praises came from Yan Xiaotang's performance. Who would have thought that the one that everyone was praising was Yi Guqin? It was laughable that Yan Feiling misunderstood and thought that it was Yan Xiaotang's performance that made everyone exclaim in admiration. Big Brother Xiaotang is so amazing. Even these people from low-rank dynasties are stunned. Yan Feiling couldn't help but admire Yan Xiaotang even more. Finally, the 8th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda lit up. Yan Wushuang and the others also narrowed their eyes. Yan Xiaotang did have some ability. Whoosh! The instant the 8th level lit up, Yan Xiaotang was directly teleported out. His clothes were torn by the sword aura. The 8th level is so dangerous. Yan Xiaotang had a lingering fear in his heart. Actually, with his strength, he could only barely pass through the 7th level. As soon as he entered the 8th level, he was forced out by the countless strands of sword qi before he could even stay for a moment. Even his clothes were torn a little. However, overall, he still looked decent and didn't look too miserable. Seeing Yan Wushuang's gaze, Yan Xiaotang pretended to be calm and walked over with his hands behind his back. Sorry, I broke my cousin's record again. The 8th level is indeed difficult. I'm sure no one can enter the 9th level. Yan Xiaotang said confidently. In his opinion, even he could only barely enter the 8th level. No one could enter the 9th level. When Yan Wushuang heard this, she said, indeed. Yan Xiaotang smiled faintly. As expected. The 8th level was the best result, and he had already reached it. However, Yan Wushuang spoke again. The smile on Yan Xiaotang's face froze. That was in the past. Now, someone has already passed the 9th level. Yan Wushuang said with a trace of a smile on her face. Impossible. Yan Xiaotang hadn't spoken when Yan Feiling spoke first. Even Big Brother Xiaotang could only pass the 8th level. How could anyone pass the 9th level? In Yan Feiling's heart, Yan Xiaotang was an absolute genius. Yan Wushuang didn't answer. Instead, she raised her snow-white neck and looked at the 9th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda with a smile on her face. The iciness and indifference on her face seemed to have melted. Yan Xiaotang was stunned. Because Yan Wushuang had always treated him with an indifferent attitude, but now, she actually smiled. Her sweet smile was like 100 flowers blooming. However, this smile wasn't directed at him. The corners of Yan Xiaotang's eyes twitched slightly as he raised his head to look. The 9th level of the Sword Sect Pagoda was lit up. Chapter 648. This, Yan Xiaotang's face immediately froze. He hadn't noticed it before, but it seemed like someone was on the 9th floor. But this, how was this possible? After experiencing the difficulty of the 8th floor, Yan Xiaotang was certain that no one could reach the 9th floor. He was a prodigy of a high-tier empire. If even he couldn't pass the 9th floor, then who in this low-tier empire could pass it? I don't believe it. Who's the one who reached the 9th floor? Yan Feiling had her hands on her waist. She suspected that Yan Wushuang was saying that on purpose. Yan Wushuang couldn't be bothered to argue with Yan Feiling and casually said, who else could it be? It's Yi Guqin who taught you a lesson. What? Yan Feiling jumped and screamed when she heard that. She then tugged on Yan Xiaotang's sleeve and said, Big Brother Xiaotang, you have to avenge me. It's Yi Guqin who injured me. Yan Feiling pretended to be wronged as she spoke. Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others looked at her with disdain. Didn't she know who was right and who was wrong? Yan Xiaotang regained his composure, but he was extremely surprised. Yiguchen was only in the 9th transformation, so how could he reach the 9th floor of the sword sect pagoda? Yan Xiaotang even suspected that it was as Yan Feiling said. Yan Wushuang was saying that on purpose to save some face. Thinking of this, Yan Xiaotang shook his head slightly and said with a smile, "Cousin, you must be joking. Even your cousin's cultivation of the Great Gate can only stop at the 8th level. That Yiguchen seems to only have the cultivation of the 9th transformation of the Divine Soul. How can he break through to the 9th level?" His tone might seem calm, but it was filled with doubt. A trace of annoyance flashed in Yan Wushuang's eyes. Yan Xiaotang might seem gentle, but he didn't have a big heart. Did he think that others wouldn't be able to pass the 9th floor just because he couldn't? Passing the pagoda doesn't depend on cultivation alone, said Yan Wushuang. Alright, then I'll wait here and see how powerful Yiguchen is, smiled Yan Xiaotang. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay here and see if what Yan Wushuang said was true. Yan Wushuang was also happy to do so. Yiguchen had already been in seclusion for more than half a month. It was about time for him to come out. After that, almost everyone waited there. Several hours passed, and Yan Xiaotang was slightly impatient. Yan Feiling was also complaining. Right at this moment, the sword sect pagoda seemed to suddenly tremble. An intense light was emitted from the 9th floor. We're finally out. Yan Wushuang's exquisite face revealed a joyful expression. When Yan Xiaotang saw this, he felt a little jealous. Yan Wushuang had always been cold to him, like a passerby. However, Yiguchen was able to make Yan Wushuang smile. There was a flash of light in the air. A handsome young man in a black robe descended. It was Yiguchen. Compared to when he entered the sword sect pagoda, Yiguchen's aura seemed to be even deeper. Although his cultivation realm did not break through, Yan Wushuang felt that Yiguchen seemed to be somewhat different from before. Yiguchen let out a deep breath. He had indeed gained a lot during his seclusion in the sword sect pagoda for more than half a month. He was not far from completely comprehending one with the sword. With the help of the green lotus painting of reincarnation, Yiguchen's reincarnation sword lotus had also reached 72 leaves. It was the same level as Feng Manlu. With the support of the Enlightenment ancient tree, Yiguchen had also comprehended a few sword intents. He also had a preliminary understanding of the 5 elemental sword intents. He could now manifest an illusory sword Dao domain. In general, Yiguchen had improved a lot in terms of sword Dao. Yiguchen, you're finally out. Yan Wushuang moved her slender legs and landed in front of Yiguchen. This is. Yiguchen nodded slightly and looked around. He discovered that many people were gathered here. Yan Feiling was there as well. There were also unfamiliar faces. I'm sure this must be Yiguchen, Brother Yi, a faint voice said. Yiguchen immediately saw Yan Xiaotang. Although Yan Xiaotang was smiling, the veins on his temples were throbbing. He did not expect someone to pass the 9th floor. How did he pass the 9th floor? Yan Xiaotang was puzzled. When he saw Yan Wushuang's attitude toward Yiguchen, his heart burned with jealousy. Yan Feiling had a look of disbelief on her face as well. Yiguchen, whom she hated and despised, actually made it out of the 9th floor. Yiguchen frowned slightly. Although Yan Xiaotang concealed it well, Yiguchen could sense a hint of hostility in his eyes. Yan Wushuang's expression darkened slightly. She briefly told Yiguchen what happened. Oh, I didn't expect there to be such a story. Yiguchen was slightly surprised. The sect master, Yan Chang'e, was a prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Yan Wushuang was originally the princess of the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Her mother was killed by the eldest princess of the Phoenix dynasty, who was also the current empress of the Phoenix dynasty. But now, it seemed that the Swallow Cloud dynasty had the intention of letting Yan Chang'e and the rest return. Looking at Yan Wushuang's gloomy face, Yiguchen sighed. Although he and Yan Wushuang had some disagreements in the past, Yan Wushuang wasn't a bad person. She was just too stubborn and stubborn. Shuang, you can also turn hatred into motivation. You might be able to deal with the Phoenix dynasty in the future, said Yiguchen. What? What did you call me? Yan Wushuang suddenly widened her eyes. There was excitement, surprise, joy, and a trace of sweetness in her eyes. Yiguchen actually called her Shuang, Yiguchen sighed inwardly. He only wanted to comfort her a little. But this made Yan Wushuang incomparably happy. At the side, the smile on Yan Xiaotang's face stiffened. It was as if he had eaten a fly, and his entire face was slightly purple. He wanted to call her Shuang, but Yan Wushuang didn't allow it. But when Yiguchen casually called her Shuang, Yan Wushuang felt as if she had eaten honey. This contrast was simply too great. What did Yiguchen do to obtain Yan Wushuang's favor? Identity, cultivation, strength, and resources. Which one of them could compare to Yan Xiaotang's? The corner of Yan Xiaotang's eyes twitched. But before he could ponder any further, two figures appeared. Another two figures, one big and one small, flew over from afar. It was Su Jianshi and Shui. Silly brat, you're finally out. Yiguchen had been in seclusion for half a month. Su Jianshi also missed Yiguchen, but she didn't dare to disturb him. She dashed in front of Yiguchen, bringing along a gust of fragrant wind. She smiled sweetly, attracting everyone's attention. What a pure girl. Yan Xiaotang was stunned once more. Big brother, are you hungry? Come and eat with Shui later. Shui pulled on Yiguchen's sleeve. Being surrounded by three beauties, two big and one small, caused the surrounding inner academy disciples to cast envious gazes over. Yan Xiaotang couldn't conceal the envy in his eyes. Yan Wushuang was one thing, but that pure girl was also intimate with Yiguchen. Furthermore, she had completely ignored him. Cough, cough. Brother Yi, since you can reach the 9th level, I'm sure your cultivation must be extraordinary. I'm itching to spar with you. Yan Xiaotang suppressed the jealousy in his heart and forced a smile. He wanted to regain his face through a spar. Yiguchen glanced at Yan Xiaotang. Why aren't you kneeling? Yan Wushuang said. What do you mean by that? Yan Xiaotang's eyes sank. Yan Wushuang's words were a little too presumptuous. How could he, the heir of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, kneel to someone else? Yan Wushuang said indifferently when she saw this, Master is right before you. Could it be that you don't want to kneel down and take him as your master? Or perhaps you were just putting on an act when you spoke on Solitary Sword Cliff? Yan Xiaotang's face froze when he heard that. Chapter 649. What did you say? Yan Xiaotang thought he was hallucinating and was extremely surprised. Yan Feiling's eyes also widened as if she'd heard something impossible. Yan Wushuang's eyes revealed a faint trace of annoyance when she saw this. Didn't you say at One Sword Cliff that if the person who left the sword mark appeared before you, you would immediately kneel down and acknowledge him as your master? Now that he's right in front of you, why aren't you kneeling? The person who left the mark at One Sword Cliff is right in front of me. Who? Yan Xiaotang's mind couldn't wrap itself around it. Then his gaze suddenly froze on Yiguchen and his scalp suddenly went numb. His throat started to become dry as he probed. Cousin, you can't be saying. Yan Wushuang nodded indifferently. Yan Xiaotang took 2 steps back. His face was somewhat pale and his body stiffened as if petrified. The person who left the mark at One Sword Cliff was Yiguchen. How is this possible? Yan Feiling's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She didn't believe it at all and shouted directly. Just now at One Sword Cliff, she was affected and moved by the poignant sword mark. She even worshipped the senior who left the mark. But now Yan Wushuang was telling her that the mark was left by Yiguchen, the person she hated and hated the most. This contrast simply made Yan Feiling have the urge to vomit blood. Cousin, are you joking? Even I couldn't leave a mark on one sword cliff. With his 9 transformations. Yan Xiaotang's tone was slightly embarrassed. Yan Wushuang frowned and said, "Are you saying that everything you said at one sword cliff was false?" "No, of course not. It's just a little unbelievable." Yan Xiaotang's blood rushed to his head and his cheeks flushed red. If he didn't control it well, his face would have turned the color of a pig's liver. If Yan Xiaotang had known this, he definitely wouldn't have thought himself clever and said those words at one sword cliff. Now he wanted nothing more than to slap himself. He felt the playful gazes of Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the other inner court disciples around him. Yan Xiaotang was abnormally embarrassed. He felt that he had never been so humiliated before. Especially Yan Wushuang's questioning gaze, which made Yan Xiaotang extremely embarrassed. But he couldn't really kneel down in front of Yi Guqin. He had no choice but to kneel. If he left directly, then he would lose the chance to pursue Yan Wushuang. Right when Yan Xiaotang was in a difficult position, Yan Wushuang spoke once more. "Right, there's one more thing I forgot to tell you. What is it?" Yan Xiaotang's expression softened slightly. He thought that Yan Wushuang was trying to help him out by changing the topic. However, before Yan Xiaotang's expression recovered, he heard Yan Wushuang speak in a flat tone. In the forest of 10,000 swords, Yi Guqin also set a record for the 10,000 swords chime. Not only that, he was even able to control 10,000 swords. Therefore, the true record in the forest of 10,000 swords is not mine, but Yi Guqin's. After listening to the story, Yan Feiling was stunned. Yan Xiaotang stood rooted to the ground, his lips trembling slightly. That was anger, but also shame. He had indeed broken Yan Wushuang's record. However, he didn't know that Yi Guqin existed, and he didn't know that Yi Guqin had actually caused the 10,000 swords chime. He looked at the expressions of the surrounding inner court disciples. Yan Xiaotang knew that Yan Wushuang wasn't lying. That was the truth. He thought of how proud he was when he caused the 7,000 swords to resonate. He even said that he had such amazing results because he was born into a good family. Now that he thought about it, Yan Xiaotang was so embarrassed that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. It could be said that all the humiliation in his life added up wasn't as much as today. His cheeks were swollen, hot and red as if they had been slapped. The corners of Yan Wushuang's mouth curled up slightly. She couldn't stand how superior Yan Xiaotang and Yan Feiling were. Even though Yan Wushuang was also considered a member of the Yenyun dynasty. But the place where she truly had feelings was the Forest of Swords sect. Some of the surrounding inner court disciples snickered. "Ha, so this is the prodigy of a high-class dynasty. That's all there is to it. Compared to senior apprentice brother Yi, he's far inferior." Some whispers sounded out. Although the voices were very soft, how could Yan Xiaotang not hear it with his cultivation? His cheeks were flushed with blood. Taking a deep breath, he forced himself to squeeze out a smile that was uglier than crying and said, "Since this brother Yi is so powerful, then I have to experience it even more." Yi Guqin frowned slightly. He did not want to bother with these boring things. Following this, Yi Guqin still had to prepare to inquire about the Chaos Essence crystals. He also had to increase his strength again to deal with the Prodigy Battlefield qualifiers as well as the battle at the summit of the Forbidden City. How could he still have time to waste on this boring battle? "Sorry, this Yi isn't interested," Yi Guqin said coolly. He could see the jealousy in Yan Xiaotang's eyes. This kind of jealousy was too childish to Yi Guqin. Not interested at all. If he had this time, he might as well find time to cultivate more. But these words were admitting defeat in Yan Xiaotang's eyes. That was right, Yan Xiaotang admitted in his heart that perhaps in terms of sword Dao, Yi Guqin had very high talent. After all, to be able to trigger 10,000 swords to chime in unison and be able to leave a mark on one sword cliff, sword Dao talent was absolutely extraordinary. But so what? Yan Wushuang also said that in these three great lands of opportunity, strength realm was not the most important. This was also to say that Yi Guqin might have high sword Dao talent, but his own strength might not be high. As for defeating Yan Feiling, putting it bluntly, Yan Xiaotang could suppress Yan Feiling in one move. Hence, Yan Xiaotang regained his confidence. The awkward expression that was originally alternating between green and white also returned to normal. His back even straightened a little, as if regaining his confidence. So what if sword Dao talent was high? Everything still depended on strength. That qualifier also looked at strength and not talent. Sigh, why is Brother Yi declining? I just want to spar a little, Yan Xiaotang said with a sigh, the corners of his mouth carrying a smile. Humph, definitely scared of big brother Xiaotang. Yan Feiling said with a snort. Earlier, she was also quite shocked and a little embarrassed. But now that Yi Guqin had admitted defeat, Yan Feiling immediately began to counterattack. Sorry, I'm not interested. Su Jianshi, let's go. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly. At that moment, a clear voice sounded. Xiaotang, you can't do that. How can he accept a challenge with the cultivation of the Grand Xian martial realm? After all, it's only the 9 transformations of the divine soul. 2 figures walked over in the air. It was Yan Changge and Yan Beilin. The one who spoke was Yan Beilin. He was quite satisfied with his son, Yan Xiaotang. Seeing that Yi Guqin was avoiding the battle, Yan Beilin laughed as if it was a matter of course. Beside him, Yan Changge took a deep look at Yi Guqin. He knew everything about Yi Guqin. He had to admit that Yi Guqin was a talent. Looks like Shuang is interested in him. Yan Changge thought to himself. Ha, father is right. I've been rude. With the cultivation of the Grand Xian martial realm, it's indeed bullying. How about this, Brother Yi, I'll only suppress my cultivation to the 9 transformations of the divine soul and spar with you. Yan Xiaotang smiled faintly. In his opinion, even if he suppressed his cultivation to the 9 transformations of the divine soul, he was still confident that he could defeat Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. Yan Wushuang looked at him expectantly from the side. She was also looking forward to seeing Yi Guqin's cultivation after so many days of cultivation. Yi Guqin, don't reject him. Just spar with him, Yan Changge said. Sigh. Yi Guqin sighed helplessly. Since the sect master had spoken, he couldn't reject him. However, when Yan Beilin saw this scene, he frowned slightly and said, that's right. Third brother, you're the pride of the sword sect Pagoda Forest. You don't have the sharpness of a sword cultivator. Even if you lose in the end, you can't lose the courage to challenge. In Yan Beilin's opinion, his son would naturally win. Yi Guqin's sigh was misunderstood as fear. Ha, is that so? Let's wait and see, Yan Changge said with a smile. Chapter 650. After that, Yi Guqin, Yan Xiaotang, Yan Changge, and Yan Beilin arrived at the arena. The battle between Yi Guqin and Yan Xiaotang seemed like a simple sparring match. However, there was more to it than meets the eye. One was from the Saint Origin dynasty's sword sect pagoda. The other was the crown prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, a prodigy from a high-tier dynasty. This battle could be said to be quite interesting. It was equivalent to a prodigy from a low-tier dynasty fighting a prodigy from a high-tier dynasty. Since Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, and the others came to the sword sect pagoda, they revealed their arrogance as prodigies from high-tier dynasties. Yan Xiaotang was still alright as he tried to hide it. However, Yan Feiling's arrogant attitude made all the disciples of the sword sect pagoda unhappy. So what if she was a prodigy from a high-tier dynasty? Did she look down on people from low-tier dynasties? Because of this, the battle between Yi Guqin and Yan Xiaotang caused a huge commotion in the sword sect pagoda. Yan Changge also allowed the outer courtyard disciples to come to the inner courtyard to watch the battle. In less than 15 minutes, thousands of inner academy and outer academy disciples had arrived at the competition square. Their faces revealed excitement as they waited with anticipation. Yan Chang'e, Yan Beilan, and many other elders were also watching from the side. Yan Wushuang, Su Jianshi, Shui, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others were also watching the battle closely. Yan Wushuang had an inexplicable confidence in Yi Guqin. But to be honest, Yan Xiaotang wasn't weak. Not to mention that his cultivation base at the grand threshold was far from what Zhou Tong's minor threshold could compare to. Yi Guqin and Yan Xiaotang faced each other at the center of the arena. Yan Xiaotang had a faint smile on his face. It was as if he had received a chance to avenge his humiliation. Yi Guqin, you're still too impulsive. Yan Xiaotang thought to himself. However, he said, I'm impressed that Brother Yi dares to accept the battle with his divine soul ninth transformation. Of course, I will also suppress my strength to the divine soul ninth transformation. The reason why Yan Xiaotang said this was because he was afraid that Yi Guqin would be wary of his strength at the grand entrance and would not dare to go all out. No need. Go all out, Yi Guqin said calmly. Oh. Yan Xiaotang looked surprised. On the other side, Yan Beilan shook his head and frowned when he heard this. Third brother, this disciple of the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest doesn't have a good temperament. He was so cowardly before, but now he's so arrogant. Ha, maybe I'm not arrogant. Yan Chang'e smiled faintly. Third brother, are you confused? Don't you know the difference between the 9 transformations of the soul and the grand entrance? Yan Beilan shook his head in disagreement. Yan Chang'e did not defend himself. Facts speak louder than words. In the arena, Yan Xiaotang also felt a little disdainful towards Yi Guqin's indifferent words. He thought that Yi Guqin was overestimating himself. However, Yan Xiaotang naturally would not go all out. He said, if I use the cultivation of the grand entrance, Brother Yi will not be able to withstand more than a few moves. Therefore, I will only use the cultivation of the 9 transformations of the soul. If Brother Yi can force me to use the strength of the grand entrance, then it will be my loss. How about it? Yan Xiaotang did not want to leave the impression that he was bullying the weak in Yan Wushuang's heart. After all, using the grand entrance against the 9 transformations of the soul was indeed bullying. Up to you. Yi Guqin did not want to say more. Then let's begin, Yan Chang'e said. The two stood facing each other. Yan Xiaotang flicked his wrist and a long sword appeared in his hand. He said confidently, I am also a sword cultivator. Brother Yi, you can go first. Yi Guqin shook his head secretly. This Yan Xiaotang kept saying that he would give in to him. It was as if he was taking care of him. Yi Guqin did not reply. Within his extreme sea of qi, true qi erupted like a whirlpool and gushed out. The terrifying true qi was extremely vigorous and spread out like waves. This, as soon as Yi Guqin released his true qi, Yan Xiaotang was slightly stunned. Was this really the true qi of the 9 transformations of the soul? Why did it feel more vigorous than his true qi? Boom! Yi Guqin stepped on the ground with one foot and used the shadow step. His body pulled out an afterimage. He held the Xianming heavy sword in his hand and slashed at Yan Xiaotang. Yan Xiaotang's expression changed and his true qi exploded as well. But before he spoke, he only used the strength of the 9 transformations of the soul, so his true qi was much weaker. Not to mention the 9 transformations of the soul, even if all the true qi of his grand entrance exploded, it would not be comparable to Yi Guqin's. Yan Xiaotang held the long sword in his hand horizontally to block the Xianming heavy sword. Yi Guqin's sword was as heavy as a mountain. It landed on Yan Xiaotang's long sword with great force. An extremely vigorous force came from the sword and the long sword was almost bent. Yan Xiaotang was forced to kneel on the ground. There were cracks all around him. This. Yan Feiling was stunned and stood rooted to the ground as if she was struck by lightning. The invincible big brother Xiaotang in her heart was suppressed to the ground in one move. Yan Wushuang and the others were shocked. Yi Guqin's strength was stronger than before. This Xiaotang was only suppressed by one move because he was caught off guard. Yan Bailin was also stunned. Yan Changge shook his head and smiled, but did not say anything. It was Yan Xiaotang who asked Yi Guqin to make the first move. Now that he was suppressed by one move, who could he blame? Yan Xiaotang, who was in the arena, was also a little embarrassed. He did not expect Yi Guqin to have such vigorous true qi. It was even stronger than him, a grand entrance expert. He was simply abnormal. Boom! After all, Yan Xiaotang was still a master of the Great Xian Gate. Although his cultivation was suppressed, he was still able to use his genuine qi and the power of his spiritual soul. The genuine qi around his body burst forth and condensed into several streaks of sword qi, piercing towards Yi Guqin's ribs. A grand entrance expert's sea of consciousness and sea of qi were completely connected. The two types of energy could be combined and used as if they were using their own hands. Yi Guqin's figure flashed and dodged the attack. Yan Xiaotang's figure started to blur. It was as if there was a cloud of mist around him, making it impossible for others to track him. Ha! It's my Swallow Cloud Dynasty's King Tier movement technique, the Misty Rain movement technique. When Xiaotang uses it, not to mention Divine Soul Realm experts, even experts of the same level will find it difficult to see through his figure. Yan Bailin smiled with a hint of pride. He was very satisfied with this son of his. The misty rain lingered in the arena. Yan Xiaotang seemed to have turned into a drizzle, making it impossible for others to track him. Yi Guqin was enveloped in the misty rain and was constantly attacked by sharp sword qi from all directions. He spun the Xianming heavy sword in his hand and blocked the sharp sword qi like a pitch-black shield. But when everyone looked at it, Yi Guqin seemed to have fallen into a passive state. Senior brother, you won't lose, right? Some of the inner courtyard disciples were worried. Yan Wushuang also clenched her fists. Although losing to a grand entrance expert wasn't shameful, she still felt a little disappointed. Yi Guqin faced it calmly. This situation wasn't difficult for him. Boom! An invisible soul fluctuation spread out. The perception of a perfected sea of consciousness was extremely powerful. Yi Guqin's eyes were swallowed by blood once again as he activated the Eye of Azura. After activating the Eye of Azura, Yi Guqin's vision became incomparably sharp. With the powerful perception of his divine soul and the support of the Eye of Azura, Yi Guqin immediately captured Yan Xiaotang's whereabouts. Holding the Xianming heavy sword in his hand, Yan Xiaotang's sword swept across the sky. Immortal Slaying Sword Technique, Immortal Fall. After so many days of seclusion, Yi Guqin's Immortal Slaying Sword technique had a great breakthrough. He directly comprehended the first four moves. The first move, Immortal Fall, condensed his true qi and directly touched Yan Xiaotang's real body. Top-grade King Tier Sword Technique. Yan Xiaotang's eyes revealed a hint of astonishment. Chapter 651. A supreme-grade king-level sword technique was considered rare even in a high-level dynasty. If it was an emperor-level martial art, it would be the ultimate martial art of the clan. However, an emperor-level martial art was extremely difficult to cultivate. Although the Swallow Cloud dynasty had an emperor-level martial art, Yan Xiaotang had yet to successfully cultivate it. Therefore, supreme-grade king-level sword techniques became his main means of attack. Yan Xiaotang did not expect Yi Guqin to see through his Misty Rain movement technique. He also did not expect Yi Guqin to have a supreme-grade king-level sword technique. Yan Bailin, who was watching the battle, looked embarrassed. He had just said that ordinary people could not see through Yan Xiaotang's Misty Rain movement technique, but Yi Guqin immediately saw through it. This made him feel embarrassed. Yan Changge was not surprised. After all, he had learned about Yi Guqin's situation from Feng Manlu. After Yi Guqin saw through his figure, Yan Xiaotang's figure materialized. Yiguchen took the opportunity to perform the second move of the immortal slaying sword technique. Immortal slashing. The ferocious sword tore through the air as the sharp sword beam pierced towards Yan Xiaotang. Yan Xiaotang's expression changed as he dodged with his misty rain movement technique. However, Yiguchen performed the third move of the immortal slaying sword technique. Immortal slaying. He slashed down with his sword. Vigorous vital energy was emitted from the blade, turning into a terrifying sword beam that was hundreds of feet long. It slashed towards Yan Xiaotang's head. Tianxian sword technique. Yan Xiaotang could not take it anymore. He immediately performed his supreme grade king-level sword technique. He did not plan to perform it at first. After all, his realm was already higher than Yiguchen's. If he performed his supreme grade king-level sword technique, it would be too much of a bully. Even if he defeated Yiguchen, he would lose face, let alone make Yan Wushuang look at him in a different light. However, now that he was forced into a corner by Yiguchen, Yan Xiaotang did not dare to hold back anymore. A similarly vigorous sword beam surged out and collided with the immortal slaying. Terrifying sword beam waves swept out in all directions. Yan Chang'e waved his hand. Vigorous vital energy turned into a shield that enveloped the square and isolated the shockwaves. Everyone stared at the battle closely. Although Yan Xiaotang had used the Tianxian sword technique to block Yiguchen's attack, he was still able to do so. But the overall rhythm and advantage of the battle were on Yiguchen's side. His limitless sea of qi and perfect sea of consciousness gave him a huge boost. As a result, his foundation wasn't any weaker than a powerhouse of the Great Profound Gate. It was also because of this that Yan Xiaotang was currently in a slightly sorry state and was in a passive position. Yan Beilin, who was watching the battle, fell silent. His expression was slightly ugly. Although Yan Xiaotang had suppressed his cultivation level, in Yan Beilin's eyes, his son could still crush all the prodigies of the low-level dynasties. However, the reality before his eyes gave him a tight slap in the face. Of course, compared to Yan Beilin, Yan Xiaotang was the one who suffered the most. He originally thought that he would be able to end the battle cleanly in a few moves and regain the face he'd lost earlier with an invincible bearing, and even make Yan Wushuang admire him once more. But now, he was being suppressed by Yiguchen. Boom! After another attack, Yan Xiaotang could not take it anymore. He performed another superb king-level sword principle. Thousand Lights Phantom Sword. The long sword in Yan Xiaotang's hand seemed to turn into 10, 10 into 100, and 100 into 1,000. The dazzling sword light swept across the sky as if it was going to engulf the entire square. What a powerful aura! The disciples of the inner courtyard exclaimed. Although they were unhappy with the attitude of Yan Xiaotang and the others, they had to admit that the prodigies of the high-tier dynasties were indeed unique. Facing such an illusory sword, Yiguchen was still calm and composed. With his perfect sea of consciousness and the eye of Azura, he could see through any illusory sword. There are 100 sword lights that are real. Yiguchen was slightly surprised. Normally, only one of the illusory swords was real. The rest were used to confuse the opponent. But in this Thousand Lights Phantom Sword, there were 100 sword lights that were real. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't be able to distinguish all of them at once. Seeing this, Yan Xiaotang's eyes flashed with a trace of a smile. Yiguchen, no matter how strong your spiritual perception is, how can you distinguish all of these 100 sword lights? Yan Xiaotang was extremely confident in this move of his. But, the corners of Yiguchen's mouth also revealed a slight smile. Although he could use his spiritual perception and the eye of Azura to distinguish these 100 sword lights, but this wasn't the simplest method. There was an even more convenient method, and that was, breaking it with brute force. Heaven-splitting sword soul, out! Yiguchen activated the sword souls in his body. In an instant, 30,000 sword souls surged out from his body. Although Yiguchen had already refined 108,000 sword souls, there was no need for him to use all of them. That was a move that could be used as a trump card. Hence, 30,000 sword souls were enough. With Yiguchen's body as the core, the green heaven-splitting sword soul surged out and violently swept in all directions. All the sword lights, no matter if they were real or illusory, were torn apart. Blunt. Firm and fierce. Unstoppable. This. Yan Xiaotang was stunned again. After the heaven-splitting sword soul broke through the Thousand Lights phantom sword, it surged towards him. What kind of move is this? Yan Balin, who was watching the battle, also took a deep breath. He had never heard of such a move before. Not good. Feeling the surging heaven-splitting sword soul, Yan Xiaotang's heart skipped a beat, and his face turned ugly. If he was completely surrounded by the green sword souls, he would lose for sure. I can't lose. No matter what, I can't lose. Yan Xiaotang clenched his teeth. Just as the 30,000 sword souls were about to completely surround Yan Xiaotang, boom! A terrifying wave of energy, like a volcanic eruption, suddenly swept out. The sword souls that filled the sky were scattered by this wave of energy. Yiguchen's eyes flashed with a strange light. At the center of the explosion, wings of true qi spread out behind Yan Xiaotang's back. He had completely unleashed the strength of his great concealed gate. Although the crisis was averted, Yan Xiaotang didn't look happy. He had promised that if he used the strength of his great concealed gate, it would be his loss. Now, it seemed that Yan Xiaotang had already lost. But how could he accept this? Previously, he had pretended to be arrogant and gave in to Yiguchen. But now, he was forced to use the strength of his great concealed gate. Yan Xiaotang felt that his face was about to be smashed. So you still have to rely on your cultivation to suppress others? Yan Wushuang revealed a trace of disdain. If Yan Xiaotang admitted defeat and didn't use the strength of his great concealed gate, she might think more highly of him. But now, it seemed that he was only a so-so. Yan Xiaotang's heart sank when he felt Yan Wushuang's cold gaze. Right now, the only way to save some face was to defeat Yiguchen. With his cultivation of the great concealed gate, it should be enough, right? Yan Xiaotang made up his mind and said, Yiguchen, you're not bad. Since that's the case, it would be disrespectful if I don't use my full strength. So be careful. Yan Xiaotang's words sounded dignified. But the disciples of the inner yard were secretly sneering. At the beginning, he pretended to be humble with the 9 transformations. But when he realized that he couldn't win, he said that he would use his full strength to show his respect. Could he be any more shameless? Furthermore, according to Yan Xiaotang's promise, he had already lost and there was no need for him to continue. Yiguchen, how about this? Yan Wushuang said. If Yan Xiaotang used the strength of his great concealed gate, Yiguchen might not be able to deal with him. I already told you to use your full strength. Yiguchen shook his head and didn't back down. Then I'll have to offend you. Yan Xiaotang was confident that victory was within his grasp. He swung his sword again. Chapter 652. Although it was still the heavenly profound sword technique, Yan Xiaotang's current strength was at the great profound martial realm. With the great profound martial realm, the power of a supreme grade king sword technique would be even greater. The sharp and fierce sword aura seemed to want to cut through the sky as it flew towards Yiguchen. The heaven-sundering sword souls along the way were all sent flying. Yiguchen's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He would never make the mistake of underestimating his opponent. The ancient god power in his body surged, and his strength multiplied. Although he did not fully summon the ancient god form, Yiguchen's strength increased once again. Deity slaying sword technique, immortal fall. Yiguchen brandished his heavy sword again. An extremely terrifying sword chi spread out, as if it had manifested a strange scene of a fallen immortal. This was the 4th move of the deity-slaying sword technique, and it was extremely powerful. With the support of the ancient god power, Even Yan Xiaotang was a little shocked by this move. Boom! The two swords collided, and ripples spread out. Yi Guqin took a few steps back, and he felt a violent force rushing into his body. The great profound martial realm was indeed a great profound martial realm. On the other side, Yan Xiaotang also took a few steps back, but he could no longer hide the shock in his eyes. Yi Guqin had actually taken his move. This was completely out of Yan Xiaotang's expectations. Yan Beilin, who was watching the battle, was also extremely embarrassed. He did not expect that there would be such a monster like Yi Guqin in a low-rank dynasty. Again. Yan Xiaotang's face twitched. If he used the strength of the great profound martial realm, he would not be able to defeat Yi Guqin. That would be a great humiliation for him. Yi Guqin faced it calmly, and he actually closed his eyes. What is he doing? The surrounding disciples were all surprised when they saw this. Brother Yi, aren't you looking down on me? Yan Xiaotang's face turned even uglier when he saw this. He did not say anything else. Only by defeating Yi Guqin could he wash away the humiliation. Boom! In the face of Yan Xiaotang's attack, Yi Guqin still had his eyes closed, and his divine spirit power spread out to sense Yan Xiaotang's aura. At the same time, he swung his sword, and a mysterious aura. It was as if he and his sword had perfectly merged together. At this moment, everyone could feel an extremely profound sword concept spreading out. This is Yan Xiaotang's level not far away, Yan Xiaotang, Yan Xiaotang's Yan Xiaotang, and Yan's Yan Xiaotang. With the help of Yan Xiaotang, I've honed my one with the sword. Although I haven't completely grasped it, I'm not far away. Previously, only Feng Manlu had managed to achieve the state of one with the sword. Xiaotang's sword profound martial sword. Although it was still the immortal murdering sword art, the power could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. Sword 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 profound sword 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 sword. Sword martial sword. Even if he unleashed his full strength, he could only fight back and not defeat him. What made him even more uncomfortable was the sword concept that Yi Guqin exuded, which made him feel a little creeped out. Although Yan Xiaotang also practiced the sword, he had not comprehended the enlightened sword heart, let alone become one with the sword. He could also feel that Yi Guqin was using him as a whetstone. How can I lose? Yan Xiaotang's eyes revealed a hint of determination. He could not be defeated like this. Heavens rise Dao sword. Yan Xiaotang shouted in a low voice. The genuine qi in his body surged violently, and the sword in his hand buzzed violently. Xiaotang, you can't. Yan Beilin's expression changed slightly as he spoke. The Celestial Rise Dao sword was the only emperor-level sword technique in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Yan Xiaotang had yet to successfully cultivate it. If he were to forcefully unleash it now, he would suffer great losses. Moreover, this was just a spar. There was no need to use an emperor-level sword technique. Heavens, what kind of aura is that? Why do I feel that it's even more powerful than a superb king-level sword technique? The aura that Yan Xiaotang released also shocked the surrounding inner yard disciples who were watching the battle. Brother Xiaotang has even unleashed the Heavens Rise Dao sword. Yan Feiling was also shocked. In the Swallow Cloud dynasty, no one except the first prince, Yan Zhexing, had successfully cultivated the emperor-level sword technique. Even Yan Xiaotang could only barely execute the first move. Moreover, it was still incomplete. Even so, its power was still far beyond that of a superb king-level sword technique. It's just a spar. It's a little too much. Yan Chang'e frowned slightly. Sigh, Xiaotang has already unleashed it. There's no stopping it. Yan Beilin also sighed slightly. Brother Yi, can you take this move? Yan Xiaotang's mouth was bleeding. He could only unleash the first move of the Heavens Rise Dao sword, and it was incomplete. Even so, its power was quite shocking. He wanted to see Yi Guqin's panicked expression. However, he did not. Yi Guqin slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were still as calm as an ancient well. If it was a complete emperor-level sword technique, Yi Guqin might have to treat it seriously. However, an incomplete sword technique was not enough to make him wary. Boom! Yi Guqin circulated his true qi with all his might and raised his hand. Vigorous sword qi gushed out and turned into a beautiful golden sword lotus in the air. There were a total of 72 leaves. It was the 72-leaf death sword lotus. Yi Guqin had unleashed the 18-leaf sword lotus and the 36-leaf sword lotus in the past. Now, he had unleashed the 72-leaf sword lotus. Endless sword qi converged into a sword lotus. It was incomparably beautiful, but it carried a terrifying aura. Whoosh! The golden sword lotus soared through the air and collided with Yan Xiaotang's move. Powerful shockwaves surged out in all directions. Yan Chang'e had no choice but to strengthen the isolation of his true qi. Boom! Accompanied by an earth-shattering explosion, the entire arena seemed to tremble thrice. A 5-foot-deep pit appeared in the center of the collision. Cracks radiated out from the surrounding area. Yan Xiaotang's figure flew backward. Most of his clothes were torn, revealing many small wounds. Coupled with the fact that he had forcefully unleashed the Heaven's Rise Dao sword, he had suffered great losses. He crashed to the ground, his entire body in pain and powerlessness. On the other side, Yi Guqin's clothes were also torn. Blood also flowed from his arm. However, in terms of physique, he was much stronger than Yan Xiaotang. These injuries could be healed quickly. Everyone in the arena fell silent. Yi Guqin had defeated Yan Xiaotang, who was at the Great Mystic Martial Realm, with his 9 transformations Divine Soul Realm cultivation base. Although Yi Guqin had defeated life and death entrances before, he had defeated a Great Mystic Martial Realm cultivator this time. Yan Feiling's face was blank. She was speechless. Her and Yan Xiaotang's so-called status from a high-tier dynasty and their pride were trampled on the ground. A prodigy from a high-tier dynasty was actually inferior to a prodigy from a low-tier dynasty. Not to mention that Yan Xiaotang had used an emperor-class sword art. At this moment, Yan Xiaotang's position in Yan Feiling's heart plummeted. Yan Wushuang and the others were overjoyed. Yi Guqin had never disappointed them. Yan Xiaotang, who was paralyzed on the ground, was so ashamed that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. Xiaotang, are you alright? Yan Beilin landed beside Yan Xiaotang and took out a quasi-sage pill for him to consume. Although his expression was ugly, he couldn't blame Yi Guqin. After all, it was Yan Xiaotang who had been forcing Yi Guqin to compete. It was also Yan Xiaotang who had used an emperor-class sword art first. Who could he blame now that he had suffered the consequences? Chapter 653. Yan Beilin was the prince of the Yenyun dynasty. Although he did not say anything on the surface, in his heart, whether it was Yan Chang'e or the sword sect Talon under his command, he faintly despised and looked down on them. In his opinion, his third brother was just messing around in a low-level dynasty. What kind of prodigy could there be in such a small sect? But reality was like a slap that woke Yan Beilin up. His proud son couldn't even beat a prodigy from a low-level dynasty. Recalling how he had confidently vowed that his son would win, but now, he was in such a sorry state, his face couldn't help but turn stiff. Yan Chang'e walked over with his hands behind his back and smiled. Looks like the disciples of the sword sect tower rely on their strength instead of arrogance. Yan Beilin was speechless and couldn't refute. Yan Beilin and the others found an excuse to leave. They didn't want to stay any longer. Yan Xiaotang was also extremely embarrassed. He also didn't want to stay any longer and left dejectedly. Senior Brother Yi, Senior Brother Yi. The thousands of inner and outer court disciples in the entire plaza cheered in unison. They were incomparably excited. Their senior brother had defeated a prodigy from a high-tier dynasty. Yi Guqin was like an undefeatable god of war in their eyes. Su Jianzhi smiled. She wasn't surprised by this result. Yan Wushuang's gaze was also focused on Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin was too dazzling, so dazzling that even a proud girl like her didn't dare to look at him directly. Yan Chang'e had been paying attention to Yan Wushuang's actions. Yan Chang'e sighed when he saw the admiration on Yan Wushuang's face. He naturally hoped that Yan Wushuang would find her own happiness and not suffer for the rest of her life like him. Yi Guqin remained calm under everyone's gazes. Defeating Yan Xiaotang wasn't a big deal. Yan Xiaotang couldn't be considered strong in the Grand Gate. His target was Gu Xiaoyang, Di Haotian, and the other prodigies from the overlord factions. Not the prodigies from some dynasties. Yi Guqin returned to the number 5 peak. Even though with his current status, he could have moved to number 1 peak where Yan Wushuang resided a long time ago, but he didn't do so. Su Jianzhi and Shui also moved to his peak. In the next few days, Yi Guqin sat cross-legged and cultivated, and he consolidated his comprehensions from the Sword Sect Pagoda. On this day, Yan Chang'e personally came to the number 5 peak and found Yi Guqin. Shuang, this girl, seems to be quite fond of you. Yan Chang'e smiled faintly. Although he was the sect leader, Yan Chang'e's personality was similar to Feng Manlu's. He was extremely peaceful and did not put on the airs of a sect leader. Yi Guqin sensed Yan Chang'e's aura at a close distance. Yan Chang'e was equally unfathomable. A top divine dwelling, or? Yi Guqin secretly pondered, but he didn't dare to be sure. However, he was certain that Yan Chang'e's cultivation was no weaker than the War Emperor, Yuan Master, and Xian Wuji. However, when he thought of Yan Chang'e's birth, it seemed to be understandable. In response to Yan Chang'e's words, Yi Guqin said faintly, "Sect leader, you must be joking." Yan Chang'e didn't mind and said casually, "Don't worry, I'm not here to be a matchmaker. Moreover, I know that you and Miss Su are together, right?" "We're also friends," said Yi Guqin. He didn't think too much about the relationship between a man and a woman. After all, the sword Dao was his greatest pursuit. "Feelings can't be forced, but I would like to ask you for a favor," Yan Chang'e suddenly said. "Sect leader, please speak your mind," said Yi Guqin. "You also know Shuang's personality. She's very proud and stubborn. She already knows her background and that the person who forced her mother to death is from the Fengni dynasty. There should be people from the Fengni dynasty coming to the Battle of Prodigies qualifiers this time, such as Princess Fengxi." Yan Chang'e sighed. Yi Guqin listened silently. He didn't know much about the other dynasties. Then, "Sect leader, do you hope that I?" Yi Guqin paused. "I hope that you can take care of Shuang at a critical moment. After all, Shuang's strength is still lacking compared to the other prodigies of the Fengni dynasty. If they fight, she might be at a disadvantage," said Yan Chang'e. "As a member of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, I naturally won't stand by and do nothing," said Yi Guqin. "That's good. Manlu's judgment has always been right." Yan Chang'e smiled faintly and left. Fengni dynasty? Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. For the Battle of Prodigies qualifiers, he needed to understand the prodigies of the other dynasties. At the same time, Yi Guqin also prepared to look for Chaos Origin crystals, hoping to break through to the chaotic sea of consciousness before the qualifiers and the battle at the Forbidden City Summit. He also wanted to collect the 5 elements sword formation if he had the chance. "I wonder where I can find Chaos Origin crystals," Yi Guqin thought to himself. After that, Yi Guqin went out to look for Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others. Of course, he did not directly say that he was looking for Chaos Origin crystals. Instead, he asked where he could gather information about the other dynasties, various precious minerals, crystals, and the 5 elements sword formation. "Maybe, we can go to the imperial capital," said Yan Wushuang. "The imperial capital?" Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with surprise. The imperial capital was the largest city in the Saint Origin dynasty, located in the Saint Origin mansion. It was also the location of the Saint Origin dynasty's imperial family, the core of the dynasty. That's right. The qualifiers for the Battle of Prodigies are approaching and the venue is the Forbidden Violet Mountain. Although there's still more than 2 months to go, the prodigies of the other dynasties have come to the Saint Origin dynasty in advance because they want to know the situation of the other dynasties. The imperial capital is undoubtedly the center of the gathering. It's not far from the Forbidden Violet Mountain. Moreover, there seems to be some kind of dynasty auction that will be held this time. The prodigies of the other dynasties will participate and auction off their treasures, explained Ji Ling. I see. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. It seemed like he had to make a trip to the imperial capital. There's less than half a month left before the auction. If you want to go, you'll have to be prepared. Of course, you'll have to prepare the crystal jades as well, said Ji Ling with a smile. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. The auction of the dynasty would definitely be much bigger than the one in the Saint Origin dynasty. If it was before, Yi Guqin would not have the confidence to participate in the auction. However, after searching the Honorable Realm's cave, Yi Guqin had obtained a huge amount of wealth. There were all kinds of quasi-sage pills, quasi-sage medicines, and rare materials. There was also a top-grade sage medicine like the Enlightenment Ancient Tree. Although it was impossible to take it out for auction. Even if he took out some leaves and branches, it would be enough to make people scramble for it. Not to mention the 1 million heaven crystals, which were equivalent to more than 100 million crystal jades. Yi Guqin's current value was comparable to the prodigies of the overlord forces, let alone the prodigies of the high-tier dynasties. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.